Chapter 22-28. The Netherworld King closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. At this time, he couldn't completely protect his people. He could only go first. Finally, he nodded. The generals around him were overjoyed. They immediately rose into the air and landed on the other side of the river while protecting him. The other generals and soldiers who knew how to fly naturally flew up and followed them to the other side of the river. They left the soldiers, officials, and people with low or no skills to wait on the other side of the valley to be devoured. The Netherworld King flew into the air. He heard the desperate cries of the people behind him. His heart twisted, and he almost tripped and fell. Fortunately, he was stopped by the generals beside him. At this moment, in the huge square, there was only a small area that wasn't invaded by the colorful fog. The people on both sides couldn't squeeze in, and they were forced to do so by the colorful fog. In desperation, they voluntarily jumped into the valley. The cries behind them were so loud that even the fog was trembling. When the Netherworld King landed on the other side of the river, his legs almost went soft. He wanted to look back, but the generals beside him were afraid that he would be soft-hearted. They directly surrounded him and ran toward the passage of green fog. Suddenly, a red shadow flashed in the green fog. A woman finally appeared and blocked the path of the Netherworld King and his people. The Netherworld King and his people were stunned. The Devil Master. She finally came back. The moment Ning Xuemo appeared, she roughly saw the situation here. Her beautiful face darkened. "Your Majesty, are you going to abandon your people and run away by yourself?" Her voice was so cold that it could freeze. The Netherworld King's face was pale. "I can't bear it, but, there is no but. If you still want to save your people, follow me." Ning Xuemo turned and flew to the other side of the river. "The Devil Master is here. The Devil Master is here to save us. Oh my God, it's really the Devil Master. She must be here to save us. Devil Master, save us." When the desperate people on the other side of the river saw the red-clothed Devil Master, they immediately shouted. Some people were so excited that they almost screamed until their throats cracked. Seeing Ning Xuemo jump to the other side of the river to save his people without hesitation, the Lord of the Netherworld was also stunned. "Your Majesty, without the bridge, those people can't cross at all. Even if you go back with the Devil Lord, it won't help. We should go first." A general saw that the Netherworld King had stopped. He was afraid that the Netherworld King would rush back in a fit of anger, so he hurriedly said. At this moment, there were about 100 generals by the Nether King's side. Naturally, there were some who agreed with that general. The Nether King swept his gaze across the generals. "What do you all think?" Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Marshal Leng from the underworld bowed to the King of Hell and said, "Your Majesty, you shouldn't put yourself in danger. Your Majesty, please go first. I have to save my subordinates, so I can't protect your Majesty anymore." After saying that, he stood up and turned to leave. He flew to the other side of the river with Ning Xuemo. Nether King Erha clenched his fists. He suddenly turned around and walked back the way he came. The other generals by his side tried to persuade him to stop. The Nether King took a deep breath, and his eyes gradually turned red. He said word by word, "I am the Lord of the Underworld, and the people on the other side of the river are my people. I can't abandon them." He flew to the other side of the river without caring about those generals. Those generals looked at each other. Even their king didn't care about the danger and flew over. How could they be cowards? Chapter 22-29. Therefore, most of the generals flew back as well. Only a few of them stayed behind. They had finally escaped from the dangerous place, so how could they be willing to go back? They stood there for a moment, then suddenly turned around and ran toward the green fog. They were smart people, so they would not associate themselves with a lunatic who was stupid enough to die despite knowing the danger. Ning Xuema's arrival was like a shot in the arm, making the desperate people cheer. Some of them even had tears in their eyes. In this kind of urgent situation, Ning Xuema naturally didn't want to waste time talking nonsense. She only said a few words, "I will take you there, but you must follow my orders. Those who disobey will be thrown into the fog." All the people agreed loudly. Ning Xuema immediately ordered these people to line up in 10 rows. The old, the weak, the women, and the children were in the middle, while the strong people who knew spells stood at the periphery. Ning Xuema turned around and looked at the Netherworld King. "Your Majesty, if you want to save your people, please stand at the end of the line, and the generals, please stand at the outermost line." Now, the end of the line and the outermost line on both sides were the most dangerous, because these 3 places were the first to be attacked by the colorful fog. The generals beside the Netherworld King opened their mouths to refuse, but the Netherworld King had already said in a deep voice, "Listen to the Devil Master's orders." He immediately assigned the guards to the outermost line, and he and 3 other generals went to the end of the line. This arrangement made all the people less anxious, and they finally had someone to rely on. At this moment, the fog was approaching the 3 sides of the line. Ning Xuema bit her index finger and drew a blood curse on the 2 sides and the end of the line. The blood curse flew into the air and imprinted on the soldiers and the Netherworld King at the outermost line. She immediately taught them a set of spells and asked them to recite it silently. At this moment of life and death, naturally, everyone displayed their greatest potential. In the blink of an eye, they learned a set of curse techniques. As they cast the spell, their bodies emitted a faint red light, which actually formed a large enchantment, enveloping the entire team. Strangely, with this enchantment, the murderous fog could no longer rush over, and it only surged around the line. Everyone in the team heaved a sigh of relief. They had finally escaped the shadow of death for the time being. Everyone looked at Ning Xuema with gratitude. They were full of hope, as if they were looking at a god, waiting for her next order. Ning Xuema said in a deep voice, "This bounded domain can last for 2 hours. I will build a bridge within 1 hour. Everyone can line up to cross the bridge. There is plenty of time. Don't crowd and don't make any noise. Do you hear me?" "Yes, sir." A thunderous response. Only then did Ning Xuema turn around. Her finger pointed forward, and countless jet-black vines with dark green leaves shot towards the opposite shore. The Netherworld King, who was at the back of the group, naturally saw it too. He couldn't help but say, "Devil Master, I also wanted to build a wooden bridge just now, but there was a mountain fire in the Rift Valley. As soon as the wooden bridge was completed, it was burned down." He didn't finish his sentence. Because he saw that the vines shot out by Ning Xuema had already flown across the Rift Valley and wrapped around the rocks on the opposite shore. There was indeed a raging fire blowing out from the bottom of the Rift Valley. However, when the fire burned the vines, it was as if it had met water and was extinguished with a puff. Such a fire couldn't do anything to these vines. What kind of material were these vines made of? The Netherworld King was very surprised. Just now, he had condensed more than a dozen kinds of wood, and some of them were especially fireproof. However, they were all burned to ashes by the fire blowing out from the Rift Valley. Chapter 22:30. These vines were not afraid of fire. The Netherworld King was puzzled, but he also heaved a sigh of relief. As for the people of the underworld, when they saw Ning Xuema building a bridge from wood, their hearts were filled with admiration. The Devil Lord was indeed the Devil Lord. Her skills were extraordinary. As long as they followed her, they would definitely be able to escape. Unknowingly, these people had already regarded Ning Xuema as their backbone and followed her lead. Ning Xuemo built the bridge very quickly. The vines flew back and forth in the air. Sure enough, in less than an hour, a green wooden bridge appeared on the Rift Valley. It was more than 6 feet wide and could allow 3 people to cross side by side at a time. After Ning Xuemo finished building the bridge, she immediately let the women and children in the middle to cross the bridge first. Under her gaze, no one dared to cut the line or cause trouble. The people followed the order and crossed the vine bridge. They were also very fast. 7,000 to 8,000 people stepped on the bridge and reached the other side without landing on the ground. The Netherworld King and his generals were the last batch to arrive. They had been supporting the wizardry barrier and were a little tired at the moment, but everyone's eyes were shining. They were excited. Once everyone was on the shore, Ning Xuemo opened her mouth. This passage leads to a grassland. There are some mutated creatures roaming around there that are good at attacking people. Therefore, it is not absolutely safe. After passing through the grassland, there is a deep and serene cave. I have already explored the cave and found that it is not dangerous for now. As for the other side of the cave, I did not explore it because I was in a hurry to come back. Maybe there is something very dangerous in the depths of the cave. Everything is unknown. Think about whether you want to stay here or follow me. It is all up to you. Actually, everyone had already seen that the Rift Valley seemed to have the effect of blocking the other fog. At this moment, the other colored fog had already surrounded the Rift Valley. They probably did not mix with each other. The 3 types of fog collided and made a sizzling sound like an object falling into a strong acid. Then, they slowly surged toward the Rift Valley. They seemed to have met with obstacles on the other side of the Rift Valley. They could not pass through the Rift Valley. It might be safe to stay here, but it might also be dangerous because no one could be sure whether the 3 types of fog would eventually break through the barrier of the Rift Valley and rush here. There was unknown danger if they went forward, but they might be able to rush out of here alive. Staying where they were was temporarily safe. This kind of thing was not easy to decide. The crowd buzzed as they discussed the pros and cons of the 2 paths with their family and friends. The Nether King did not hesitate. He naturally chose to walk forward with Ning Xuemo. After a while, the people present finally made a decision. Most of them chose to follow Ning Xuemo. Even if it was risky, they would rather follow this demon master and charge in. Only a little over 100 chose to stay. Ning Xuemo rearranged the troops. The old, the weak, the women, and the children were still in the middle, and the soldiers of the underworld were on all sides. She was at the front, and the Netherworld King and a few generals were at the back. The group of people entered the foggy passageway and gradually went far away. The remaining 100 or so people sat down where they were. They were also paying attention to the movements of the tricolored fog. If there were any abnormalities, it would not be too late for them to turn around and run. Once the people who were exploring in the front went out, they would definitely break the array. At that time, they could follow the trail and escape safely. There was no need for them to take the risk. Now, all they needed to do was to sit here and wait quietly. After about an hour, these people were completely enveloped by the soft green fog. They were not in a hurry to move. Chapter 22:31. There was no danger in the green mist, and the air was very fresh. Some people were already yawning in the green mist. And the sudden change happened in an instant. A buzzing sound came from the originally harmless green mist, as if a large swarm of bees was quickly approaching. Everyone opened their eyes and were scared out of their wits. Horrified screams came from the green mist. A moment later, the bodies of more than 100 people were covered with pine needles. They stood there like pine balls, and blood dripped down from the pine needles. There was a sound of wind in the green mist, and a man in purple holding a folding fan appeared. He looked very handsome, and when he walked slowly, it was as if he was taking a stroll. He walked around the pine needles, and the corner of his mouth hooked up. Only 120 people chose to stay and not go with her. That girl, her appeal is quite strong. He raised his hand, and a purple light circled around the dead people, picking up countless translucent souls. Those souls struggled in the purple light, trying to escape. He licked his lips and sighed. Although the number is small, it's better than nothing. He took back the purple light, ignored the wailing of those souls, and forced them into a small gray ball. Then, he stuffed it into his mouth and swallowed it. A faint black gas came out of his body, circled around him, and then scattered. He stood up and pursed his lips, as if he was savoring the taste. After a moment, he sighed. In the end, there is not enough resentment. It's a pity that the girl ruined my plan. Otherwise, all the children in the city would have been used by me and turned into little ghosts. Then, they would have chased and killed their parents. Those parents who died in the hands of their children must have a lot of resentment. My martial arts would have improved even faster. Sigh, it's a pity. He shook his head, but then smiled as if he thought of something. Since he had planned and arranged for so long, he would succeed in the end. These people would be his sooner or later, and he would just have to spend a little effort. As for the girl, he wanted her to see with her own eyes that all the things she protected disappeared in his hands. He wanted her to see the day when he became the real ruler of the 6 realms. He would break all of her wings and make her blossom beneath him. When the streets of Ming City began to shake, the crystal ball in front of Shen Nianma began to tremble as well. The image was distorted, and the colors were almost indistinguishable. Hey! Little Nianma could not help but pat the crystal ball, trying to capture the image inside again. The crystal ball did not disappoint him. After a while, the image finally stabilized. Little Nianma hurriedly looked at the crystal ball again, but it was as if he had been hit in the face. He was so shocked that he could not make a sound. The street was still the same, and the shops on both sides of the street were still standing there. Even the blood-red coffin was still there, but the person was gone. Not only was he unable to see his mother again, even those noisy commoners, the majestic King Yama, the mischievous children, all of them had disappeared without a trace. Little Nianma did not give up. He tried to move the image around, but it was empty as far as the eye could see. There was not even a shadow in sight. What's going on? Even if the wind blew, it would not be so clean. Little Nianma was stunned for a moment. He could not help but turn around and say, "Hey, Lord Lotus, look at this." He was about to ask her to look at what was going on, but he swallowed his words halfway. His pair of big eyes were wide open. "You? Who are you?" Chapter 2232. The child who looked similar to him was no longer behind him. Instead, there was a young man in white who was meditating. The young man looked like he was about 12 or 13 years old. His silver hair was as white as snow, and his eyebrows were beautiful. He looked elegant as if he was carved out of ice. He was beautiful yet cold. There were faint layers of white light surrounding his body. The young man seemed to be awakened by little Nianma's voice. He slowly opened his eyes. His pair of deep blue eyes were like an ice lake. They looked straight into little Nianma's big eyes. The young man saw his own reflection in Nianma's clear eyes. He narrowed his eyes slightly. "Nianma." His voice was no longer a child's voice. It was the cool and magnetic voice of a young man before he changed his voice. You. Little Nianma was so shocked that he could not speak. You are. The young man's appearance was very similar to his father. However, little Nianma's impression of his father was that of an adult. Although the young man's appearance was also extremely beautiful, there was a kind of neutral childlike innocence. The scene was too strange. Little Nyenma could not react for a moment. After a while, he finally said, Are you my brother? The young man originally reached out his hand to pat his big head, but he was stunned by his words. His fingers gently pressed on little Nyenma's shoulder and said in a deep voice, Nyenma, I am your father. Father. Little Nyenma was stunned. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was so wide that it seemed like an egg could be stuffed into it. The young man was naturally Shinjuli, who had succeeded in his cultivation again. He raised his arm and hugged his son in his arms. He used his hand to close his little mouth. All right, kid, what did you see? What do you want me to see? As he said that, he looked into the crystal ball and saw an empty street. His expression changed slightly. What is going on? Little Nyenma's mind was buzzing. He felt like he was struck by lightning. He could not react for a moment. At this time, he subconsciously said, I don't know. Just now, in the crystal ball, there was a sudden four-colored fog on the street. Then, the image shook like an earthquake. When it stopped, there was no one in it. He was almost mechanically stating the facts. In the end, he finally got some feeling. Is my mother okay? Ah. Where was she? You. He found it hard to say the word father. Shinjuli stood up and patted little Nyenma's head. Nyenma, wait here obediently. I'll go save your mother. With a flash of white light, Shinjuli's figure disappeared from the crystal cave. Little Nyenma remained silent. He stood there in a daze, his mind still blank. The sudden ecstasy and bewilderment left him in a daze. It took him a while to react. His brain finally started working again. Father. This person was his father. His father was not dead. Or was Venerable Lotus joking with him? However, this Venerable Lotus really smelled like father. Now that he had grown bigger, his appearance was also very similar. And the way he talked to him was really no different from when he was teaching him in the Fanteon Palace. Father is back. Father is back. Father is back. Father is back. This good news flooded his mind like crazy, from the initial disbelief to the final joy. Chapter 2233. The Heavenly Law Stone had been watching silently. It was shocked when Shinjuli suddenly left, but it also knew that once the Divine Lord decided to do something, no one could stop him. Therefore, it could only let him go. Before Shinjuli left, he reminded the Heavenly Law Stone, take good care of my son. Do not let any accident happen to him. Then, he disappeared into the ground in a blink of an eye, leaving the Heavenly Law Stone there in a mess. It was the Heavenly Law, the Heavenly Law. What a high and mighty status. He actually treated it like an old mother. It even took care of his child. At first, the Heavenly Law Stone wanted to crazily refresh the crystal, but it suddenly stopped when it saw the expression on little Nyenma's face. Little Nyenma was in a daze at first. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was agape. Then, he seemed to have realized something. His little face turned red and white, and his pair of big eyes began to fill with tears. His facial expression was as if he was crying and laughing at the same time. He seemed to be very happy, but also very sad. He stood there stupidly and murmured, Father. Is it really Father? I am not dreaming, am I? He raised his hand and pinched his fleshy calf. Ouch! Then, he opened his mouth and laughed foolishly. It is not a dream. Ah, I am not dreaming. The Heavenly Law Stone was a little worried. Was the child so happy that he became silly? Shinjuli's impact on his son was indeed too big, and the child was still too young. When the Heavenly Law Stone was thinking about this, little Nyenma had already cheered and jumped down from the lotus platform. He was jumping and jumping there. Father! Father is back! Ha ha ha, Father is actually back! He was like a little fool running in circles there, as if his heart was about to explode with joy. In a moment of carelessness, his body bumped into a crystal, and he fell on his butt. The Heavenly Law Stone was afraid that he would really hurt his tender skin, so it quickly helped him up. After little Nyenma jumped up, he suddenly rushed to the crystal cave wall and hit his little hands desperately. Let me out, let me out. Nyenma wants to go with Father to save Mother. The Heavenly Law Stone felt that it was in trouble. An overwhelming amount of greenery rushed over. The vegetation here was growing like crazy. The trees had grown into towering heights. The small grass that was originally a foot long had grown to the height of a small tree. The leaves were wide and large, cutting people like saws. Although this was a grassland, it was a grassland that had grown wildly. Not only were the plants here different from ordinary plants, they were exceptionally wide. Even the various animals that roamed the grassland were strangely tall. Centipedes that were more than 10 feet long could swim out of the bushes, and mantises that were 3 feet long could also jump out of the bushes, brandishing their sickles. A rabbit the size of a leopard could also jump out. Its pair of red eyes and fangs shone frighteningly under the sunlight. All in all, everything here was super large. As people walked through it, they almost suspected that they had been shrunk, because anything that popped out was bigger than a person, and they were all attacking people. There was no path on the grassland. They had to rely on Ning Xuema and a few other netherworld generals to clear the way. The commoners walked to the center, although there were guards on both sides. After all, there were more commoners than soldiers. Moreover, they were scattered, so they could not take care of everyone. From time to time, various kinds of ferocious beasts rushed out of the bushes and dragged people out. Screams and screams could be heard from the team from time to time. However, no one dared to stop. Everyone was running forward with all their might. No one dared to fall behind. Falling behind only meant one thing: death. Chapter 22:34. Because there were too many ferocious beasts hiding in the bushes on both sides, once the troops stopped, it would be an absolute massacre. The weapons in the hands of the netherworld soldiers and generals never stopped. They kept running and fighting with all kinds of ferocious beasts that came out. Blood dyed the clothes of those generals red, and dyed their eyes red. In front and behind them, countless ferocious beasts' corpses fell. Fortunately, this path was not considered long. When the super-huge cave appeared in front of them, everyone cheered. The demon master said that the cave was safe. As long as they entered the cave, they could take a breather. Almost everyone stared at the red-clothed demon master who was opening the path in front. He was their only hope to get out alive this time. Ning Xuema's heart sank slightly. She had a premonition that things were not good. She had already come to this grassland twice. In less than 2 hours, the grassland had already changed greatly. The grass was taller, and the beasts were fiercer. If she had not arranged the people of the underworld to advance in a formation, she was afraid that more than half of them would have died on this grassland. Even so, they had lost 300 to 400 people along the way. This was already the lowest number of casualties. The situation of the grassland had changed. She did not know if there were any changes in the cave. She waved her hand and made the troops behind her stop temporarily. She flew into the cave, wanting to check the situation first. But she quickly retreated. A fishy wind blew in the cave, and a green-black huge creature came out from inside. It was a huge python with a long horn on its head. Its body was dozens of feet long, and its lantern-like vertical pupils were even taller than a person. It lay there, blocking the entrance of the cave completely. There was a person standing on top of the python's head. His purple robe fluttered in the wind, and his features were elegant. There was a smile on his lips. "Little Shuama, we meet again." Luo Jochin. He actually appeared again and blocked everyone's escape route. Everyone finally saw hope, and now this person suddenly appeared. It was obvious that he wanted to stop them from entering the cave. Everyone clenched their fists, and their teeth were itching with hatred. All kinds of ferocious beasts had already popped their heads out from the bushes behind them, rushing over like a tide. It was obvious that they wanted to treat this group of people as food. Everyone's face changed color. The Nether King's eyes stared at the python. Suddenly, he shouted with a trembling voice, "Hua, The python's red pupils slightly trembled, and it looked at the Nether King. "Hua, why are you here?" Luo Jochin was Luo Jochin's mount. Ning Shuama's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know that the Hades clan's original body was a python. Was this big black python the substitute Hades king? Was he also controlled by Luo Jochin? She looked at the python and saw that its eyes weren't cloudy. It was obvious that it had intelligence. Luin Hua's Luo Huaz's Luo, Huaz's. He's, Huaz, the nether of the king's nether king's Huaz. Of Nea Hua, of the Hun of the Nev, Huns. Nea of the were was Luo Hua. Luo Nedli Luinit. Of the was of them. Not only did the Nether King's eyes turn red, but the eyes of all the generals of the underworld also turned red. A warrior would rather be killed than humiliated. Luo Jochin's actions were like taking a dump in the sky of the underworld. He didn't put the entire underworld in his eyes. Chapter 22:35. The big python froze from his kick and did not move for a while. "Speak." Luo Jochin kicked the python again. This time, he seemed to have kicked an important part of the python. The python tensed up and finally said in a muffled voice, "Father, you don't have to care. I did volunteer to become Lord Luo's mount, the Netherworld King, all the Netherworld generals." They felt like they had been slapped in the face. Everyone's faces were burning. The Netherworld King clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Little bastard." The Netherworld King scolded. "You are so useless. I will treat it as if I don't have a son like you." The python lowered its eyes slightly, but Luo Jochin laughed loudly. His laughter was clear and melodious. "Nether King, it's his fortune to be able to be my mount." The Netherworld King said angrily, "You must have used some method to coerce him." Luo Jochin opened his folding fan and said casually, "You think your son was coerced? If I told you that your son was willing to cooperate with me and that he even contributed greatly to this operation, would you believe me?" The Netherworld King, he gritted his teeth. "Nonsense. Why would Hua scheme against her own people?" Luo Jochin shook his head and sighed. "Even if I told you the truth, you wouldn't believe me." He curled his lips into a smile and kicked the python beneath him with the tip of his foot. "Why don't you say it yourself?" Now that the truth had been exposed, the python closed its eyes and finally opened its mouth. "Father, I did participate in a large part of this operation. I sent some people to assist you." The Hell King's face paled. Actually, when he saw the assassins crushed to death by Ning Shuama's coffin and the spies caught by Ning Shuama, he had some suspicions. One of them looked like Hua's guard. He just didn't dare to believe it. Even if he recognized him, he didn't expose him. He wanted to go back to the Netherworld Palace and talk to his son. He didn't expect that. "Why did you do this?" The Netherworld King's voice trembled. He didn't know if he was angry or disappointed. The python seemed to have made up its mind. I just don't want to be a powerless crown prince anymore. Ever since Imperial Father came back, those soldiers and subjects no longer listen to me. The Netherworld King, it turned out to be an old drama of father and son fighting for power. That son despised his father for being too old to succeed him, so he colluded with outsiders. At this moment, the back of the group had already been attacked by all kinds of ferocious beasts, and some of them were panicking. Ning Xuema was prepared in advance. She had already ordered the people to quickly form a circular formation. The warriors were at the outermost circle, and then set up a defensive barrier around them. Her psyche power was combined with the psyche power of the generals, so her defense was not weak. Therefore, the continuous attacks of the beasts were not effective for the time being. However, after all, the people had been running around for such a long time. They were all tired and impatient. The number of ferocious beasts was large, and their attacks were fierce. After a while, the generals who were supporting the barrier began to feel the strain. If this continued, the barrier would break in less than an hour. Then, these 6,000 to 7,000 people would become a delicious meal for the ferocious beasts. The Netherworld King was obviously aware of this danger. He took a light breath and looked at Luo Jiuqin. Supremacy Luo, the Netherworld realm has no enmity with you. Why do you have to force us? Chapter 22:36. Luo Jiuqin narrowed his eyes and smiled. His smile was still as bright as before. Netherworld King, you are the master of a world. How can you be so naive? You should understand that sometimes, there is no enmity between us. The Netherworld King gritted his teeth. Then what do you want? Luo Jiuqin tapped his fan against his palm. This is none of my business. You can ask your precious son what he wants. The Nether King and his subjects were stunned. Everyone turned to look at the giant python. Now that things had developed to this point, the python finally made up his mind and put forward his conditions. If they wanted to live, they had to go to his side, recognize him as their master, and follow him. Although the python's voice was muffled, the conditions it offered were tempting enough. As long as they followed him, recognized him as the new Netherworld King, and became his subordinates, he would be responsible for sending them out of this strange place and let them go home. Even the old Netherworld King was the same. After he came over, even if he handed over his power, he would take care of the old Netherworld King on account of their father-son relationship. These conditions were undoubtedly very tempting for the thousands of people who were fighting for their lives on the tip of a knife. Luo Jiuqin stood high up on the python's head, smiling as he looked at the dense crowd in front of him. He believed that once this condition was put out, at least 4/5 of the people here would join his camp. No one was not afraid of death, not to mention that the majority of this group of people were commoners. The smile on his lips was perfect. His eyes fell on Ning Xuema, waiting for the moment when she was betrayed by everyone. After all, these people of the Netherworld realm were not her subordinates. They would not risk their lives for her. Maybe they would betray him and stand on his side, leaving Ning Xuema to become a true loner. He wanted this girl to taste the feeling of being abandoned. Only when she suffered a fatal setback would she understand the situation and truly fall into his arms. However, after waiting for a moment, the smile on his face froze in the wind. There were 6,000 to 7,000 people here, but only a few dozen people walked over in fear. The others stood silently in their original spots, with no intention of moving at all. Forget about the Netherworld King and those old generals who were loyal to the Netherworld King. But what about the soldiers and the common people? Did they take the wrong medicine? Don't know how to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. Not only did Luo Jiuqin's expression turn ugly, but the python also felt that it had lost all face. It glared at them with its pair of vertical pupils. I'll give you a moment more. If you don't come over, this king will no longer care about your lives. Marshal Lang finally couldn't help but spit. I'd rather be the tail of a phoenix than the head of a chicken. I won't accept a person who is willing to be someone's mount as my master. The others also looked at the python coldly. Obviously, they had the same idea as Marshall Lang. Moreover, they had gone through thick and thin with the Devil Master for so long, so they already understood her personality. They would rather follow her and risk their lives than follow a mount leader and become subservient from then on. Luo Jiuchen stroked his fan and chuckled. Good. Good. He had a backbone. I hope you will continue to be so unyielding. He patted the python's head with his fan and said, let's go. Take these people who are willing to follow you. He glanced at the few dozen people around him, smiled, and did not say anything else. Chapter 22:37. The python snorted, turned around, and crawled into the cave. The dozens of people looked at each other and hurriedly followed. It was better to live than to die. They were just ordinary people, and they just wanted to go home. Luo Jiuchen's voice came from the cave. If you follow me into this cave, it means that you have joined my camp. I will not treat you badly. I will wait for you here. Everyone looked at each other. This cave was the only way they could survive. If they stayed outside for a long time, the wizardry barrier would break, and they would not be able to resist the tide of beasts. Devil Master, what should we do next? The Netherworld King did not know what to do. He was relieved that his people did not betray him, and he felt a heavy responsibility. Even if he had to risk his life, he wanted to protect his people. But now, they could not find another safe place, and the wizardry barrier could not hold on any longer. Ning Xuemo looked at her surroundings before suddenly walking towards the pitch-black cave entrance. The old Netherworld King was shocked. Devil Master, we can't go in there. Otherwise, we will be considered to have joined their camp. Ning Xuemo looked at him with a faint smile. Your Majesty, why are you not willing to join his camp? After all, if you followed him, you might be safe now. The old Netherworld King took a deep breath and said, although I am slow-witted, I can still distinguish between right and wrong. This High Lord has an evil heart. Even if I die, I will not submit to him and let my people become the slaves of an evil person. The others also said that this Lord was too evil. He actually used their children to practice evil skills. They would rather die than be associated with such a person. Some people even said that they would rather suffer with the Devil Master than be Luo Jiuchen's lackey in order to survive. In ancient times, it was difficult to win people's hearts. Ning Xuemo had only been with these people for half a day, but she had already won their trust. The trust that was built up through trials and tribulations was the most unbreakable. This kind of trust could not be suppressed by violent means. Ning Xuemo felt warm in her heart. She said slowly, thank you for your trust in me. I will do my best to let you go home safely. A promise was heavier than 1,000 caddies. The Nether King bowed deeply to Ning Xuemo and said, My lord, from now on, the underworld will follow your orders. Previously, he had thought that this little Devil Master only had the courage of a fool, but after today's real contact, he discovered that this little Devil Master was truly brave and resourceful. Moreover, although she was a devil, she was able to stick to her bottom line and would not do anything that was too out of line. Being compassionate at all times, only such a person deserves to be the master of the 6 realms. Ning Xuemo naturally understood what he meant. She knew that he wanted her to take the position of the master of the 6 realms. The image of Shinjiuli flashed through his mind, and his heart suddenly ached. If he was still alive, if he was still by her side, why would she need to risk her life like this? However, no matter what, she would never take the position of master of the 6 realms. If she really took that position in the future and replaced him, perhaps he really wouldn't be able to return. She would not allow anyone but him to sit on that seat. As long as that seat was there, there was hope for him to come back. she didn't want to lose even this little bit of hope. She thought of the light that suddenly appeared to help her throw the person into the blood coffin. It was so similar to him. So similar to him. So similar to him. Chapter 22:38. But it wasn't him after all. Otherwise, why didn't he appear in front of her when he was here? She was in a daze for a while. She didn't wake up until Pluto called her. Looking at Pluto's suspicious eyes, she coughed and shook her head. She shook off all the messy thoughts in her mind. Only Shinjuli's matter could make her distracted at such a tense time. She calmed down and continued to walk towards the cave. Devil Lord. Pluto was confused. Ning Xuema raised her hand and touched the wizardry barrier at the entrance of the cave. She smiled faintly. This cave doesn't belong to him. Can he enter it? We can't enter it. It doesn't make sense. Let's just take this cave. When Luo Jiuqin appeared just now, she thought it would be a fierce battle. She didn't expect him to ride the black python into the cave so easily. This was not normal. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. Maybe Luo Jiuqin was also injured. His kung fu was not as high as she thought. Maybe this was an opportunity. She had to seize it. When the Nether King and the others heard her words, it was as if they were suddenly enlightened. They were instantly enlightened. Yes, this cave did not belong to Luo Jiuqin. When enemies meet on a narrow path, the brave will win. Whoever has the harder fist will be qualified to occupy this cave. Maybe they were not Luo Jiuqin's opponents. Maybe they would die in his hands. But now, if they just waited outside, they would also die. They would die anyway, so they might as well fight. Everyone's eyes lit up. They were like wolves. Luo Jiuqin set up a wizardry barrier at the entrance of the cave. As soon as Ning Xuema's fingers touched it, she heard the spell that could unlock the barrier. As long as she pressed her hand on the barrier and shouted 3 times, "I am willing to follow the Lord," the barrier would let the person who shouted in. Ning Xuema used her hand to touch the barrier. The corner of her lips curled up as she beckoned to the underworld generals. The generals came over to listen to her orders. Press your hands on the barrier and shout "Luo Jiuqin, you bastard," 3 times, and the barrier will open. Although the generals felt that the chant to break the barrier was too strange, they now had complete trust in Ning Xuema. Naturally, they would chant whatever Ning Xuema told them to. Therefore, the moment they placed their hands on the barrier, they shouted loudly, "Luo Jiuqin, you bastard." These people all had loud voices. Once they shouted, their voices could be heard from 10 miles away. What's more, 7 or 8 people shouted at the same time. That sound was enough to split rocks and pierce through clouds. However, it was only after they shouted that they realized that when their hands touched the enchantment, the chance to break the enchantment rang in their ears. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned. At the same time, Ning Xuema made her move. After making a few complicated hand gestures, a red light struck the barrier. The barrier almost broke with the shouts of the men. Everyone was stunned. Ning Xuema made a funny face. She jumped up and took the lead to rush into the cave. The Netherworld King didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This Devil Master was sometimes a little childish, but he was very likable. With this Devil Master leading the way, what else was there to be afraid of? They all followed behind and rushed into the cave. They didn't know what was strange around the cave. The ferocious beasts that were originally chasing after them retreated when they got close to the cave. Some of them couldn't bear to give up the delicious food that was about to enter their mouths, so they followed a few more steps. They didn't expect that these few steps would reveal their true colors. Chapter 2239. The rabbit that was as big as a leopard and the vole that was as big as a wild boar actually returned to their normal size in an instant and were killed by a few strong men. The cave was very deep, and the Nether King thought that he would be able to meet Luo Jiuchen here. However, he didn't expect that after walking in, he wouldn't find any trace of Luo Jiuchen and his unfilial son. Even the dozens of people who had followed Luo Jiuchen were nowhere to be seen. The Nether King didn't know if he was disappointed or relieved. This cave was very wide, and even with so many people inside, it wasn't crowded at all. Instead, it was very spacious. Ning Xuema walked around the cave and looked into the depths of the cave. She said in a low voice, "They have already left." The danger had temporarily disappeared, and everyone heaved a sigh of relief. After running for so long, everyone was exhausted. The Nether King ordered everyone to sit down and rest. Everyone was eager to hear this order, and they sat down on the ground in a mess. Ning Xuema sat together with the Nether King and a group of high-ranking generals to discuss the next step. The result of the discussion was that Ning Xuema and a few high-ranking generals would go to the front to find a way to escape, while the others would rest and wait here. This was undoubtedly the best plan at the moment. It was very dangerous to bring a large group of people with them. After all, there were many ordinary people here, and there were thousands of children. Not only would it slow down the journey, but it would also be more dangerous and cause more casualties. However, this place was relatively safe. With a few hundred soldiers protecting them, there would be less danger. Some of the people in Nether City suddenly realized that the most prosperous and lively street in the city had suddenly disappeared. The place that was supposed to be the street had become somewhere else. Those people who were far away from this street wanted to come here to watch the show, but they couldn't find this street anymore. A street could actually disappear. Those people were a little flustered and didn't understand what had happened. They were wandering around to search when a white light suddenly flashed in the crowd, and a white-robed youth appeared out of thin air. This youth wasn't tall, and his face was young. He looked to be about 12 or 13 years old, but his face was shockingly beautiful. There were many handsome men in the netherworld, but compared to this youth, they were like dirt and pearls. This youth had clearly appeared silently, but the moment he appeared, he was like a ball of moonlight that attracted everyone's attention. This young man was naturally Shinjiuli. Originally, he had wanted to wait until he had fully recovered before coming to see Ning Xuema and fiercely pulling her into his arms to protect her. However, this sudden change forced him to give up on this plan. After recovering less than a third of his power, he came out. His positioning was very accurate. The place where he appeared should be at that street, but after landing, he found that it was far from the case. He had indeed landed on a street, but it wasn't the street with jade stones. The moment he appeared, he was surrounded by a circle of people. Shinjiuli had always been surrounded by onlookers in his life, so he didn't care about the gazes of the onlookers at all. After walking half a circle on the street, he understood what was going on. Someone had used a spell to hide the street. In other words, it was blocked. Normal people would never be able to find that place again. Shinjiuli pursed his lips slightly. He was naturally not a normal person. This kind of camouflage could not stop him, thus, the citizens who were secretly watching saw a rather strange scene. Chapter 2240. That unbelievably beautiful young man in white made a hand gesture on the street and then disappeared into thin air. Disappeared. The curtains were fluttering in the wind, and the dust on the street was dancing in the wind. Cheap rouge, face powder, and all kinds of sundry goods filled the entire street. The wonton stall was still steaming, and the hot water in the pot was still boiling. This used to be the busiest street in Nether City. At night, the street would be crowded with people, both rich and poor. They all liked to wander back and forth on this street. There might not be many things here, but there were definitely many people. But now, this street was suddenly empty. All the goods were still there, all the shops were still there, but there were no people. The wind blew from one end of the street to the other, and it was eerily desolate. Nether City was huge, and there were hundreds of thousands of people in the city. Although this street was not long, there were usually 10 to 20,000 people moving around here. Now, all these people were gone, silence. The street was eerily quiet, and no other sound could be heard. Shinjuli finally appeared on the street that had disappeared. He appeared near the shop that sold the white jade doll. The shop had collapsed, and there was only a pile of broken bricks and wood. The blood coffin was not far from the shop, and the lid of the coffin was still open. There were some blood stains at the bottom of the coffin. He stood in front of the coffin, and his fingers bent slightly to form a seal. A white light was emitted, and it went around the blood coffin. After a moment, he stopped and shook his head slightly. The souls of the people who fell into the blood coffin disappeared. His original plan of capturing a soul to interrogate had failed. He looked around, and his heart sank. Qian Kun teleportation technique. And a misty chain soul stealing array. That meant that someone had used the Qian Kun teleportation technique to move all the people on this street into the misty chain soul stealing array. No matter if it was setting up such a big array or using the Qian Kun teleportation technique, it required a very high level of technique. And in the 6 realms, there were only 2 people who could use this technique. One was himself, and the other was Luo Jiuqin. Excluding himself, there was only one person who set up such a harmful array here, Luo Jiuqin. All of this was caused by this person. It seemed like he had been hiding in the crowd all this time, and then at the most critical moment, he activated the array formation and brought everyone in the street in. Who would have thought that after not seeing each other for tens of thousands of years, Luo Jiuqin had become so proficient in array formations? He was actually able to create such a complicated extermination array here. This was an extremely sinister and evil array. It could absorb the souls of all the people inside the array, causing them to be completely annihilated without leaving a corpse behind. Entering this array was equivalent to stepping on the steps of the Yama Palace. It was extremely difficult to turn back. Unless this array was completely destroyed, or the person who set up the array was merciful and automatically released the people trapped inside, there was no way to save them. If he wanted to break this array, he could only find the core of the array inside and break it. There was nothing he could do outside the array. What was worse was that once the person who set up the array came out, he could activate all the mechanisms in the array from outside, causing all the mechanisms in the array to explode at once. At that time, it would be a great purgatory inside, and no one would be able to find a safe place. They could only wait inside to be completely swallowed up by the array, and their souls would be condensed by the person who set up the array, becoming the source of an evil technique. Shinjuli was an expert in setting up arrays, so he naturally knew the dangers of this array. Chapter 2241. Shinjuli was an expert in setting up arrays, so he naturally knew the dangers of this array. Although Ning Xuema was smart enough, she would not be able to break the array with her abilities, so he had to go in to save her. But if Luo Jiuqin escaped and activated the array while he went in to save her, then both he and Ning Xuema would die inside, and the chances of them escaping would be almost 0. He closed his eyes slightly and opened them again. It did not matter. He did not believe that he could bear the pain of losing her again. So, they would live together, and they would die together. He wanted to find her and be with her. He did not want to leave her alone to suffer the pain of losing him. His gaze swept over the surrounding shops inch by inch, and his figure was like the wind returning to the snow, patrolling the entire street. If he wanted to enter this array, he had to find the hidden array door. The array door was very small, and a bathtub could be this kind of array door, but it was hidden so well that it could not be found easily. To find such an array door among the countless shops on this long street was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even Shinjioli, who had the ability to defy nature, would have to spend a lot of effort to find it. Fortunately, Shinjioli was extremely smart and had a strong sixth sense when it came to Ningxiumo, so he only circled the street twice before he found the array door in a bathhouse that was not much bigger than a mouse hole. He looked at the array door for a moment, and after confirming that there was no mistake, he threw a talisman at it. "My lord, are we just going to let them have the cave?" The black python's tone was somewhat unwilling. After all, they are your subjects and your father, aren't they?" Luo Jiuqin, who was on the black python's back, chuckled lightly, and one could not tell whether he was happy or angry from his laughter. The cave was unfathomably deep, and wherever the black python's scales went, there was a rustling sound, like a silkworm chewing on mulberry leaves, which made one's hair stand on end. The dozens of people who had surrendered hurriedly followed behind the black python. After a while, these people were even more exhausted, and one of them could not help but ask, "Your Majesty, my lord, are we going back?" Black Python didn't speak. Luo Jiuqin's voice was gentle. "Yes, I'll send you home now." There was the sound of water flowing in front of them. Those people were in a hurry and were very thirsty. When they heard the sound of water, they were overjoyed and followed the sound. The black python opened its mouth as if to say something, but Luo Jiuqin, who was on its back, gently tapped it with his foot, and it closed its mouth. Sure enough, those people found a small stream. The water was clear and cold to the touch. Everyone cheered and rushed to the stream. They squatted down and scooped up the water to drink. One of them was more cautious. Before drinking, he asked, "My lord, is this water drinkable?" Luo Jiuqin's voice was faint. "Yes, this water is called honey fantasy. It tastes sweet and makes people want to drink more." His words put everyone at ease, and they all fetched water to drink. This water was indeed extremely sweet, and it indeed made people want to drink more after drinking it, endlessly drinking it. Everyone drank until their stomachs bulged, but they still couldn't drink enough. After drinking a mouthful, it was as if they were addicted and couldn't stop their desire to drink more. Some of them simply lay in the stream and drank like a cow. Some people finally realized that something was wrong while drinking the water. They wanted to stop and get up, but they couldn't. The water that entered their stomachs seemed to be melting their whole body. Then, they realized in horror that they were indeed melting. Chapter 2242. After a while, the dozens of people who were drinking water were gone. Their bodies turned into water and flowed into the stream. Not even their bones were left. The black python looked in the direction of the stream with pity in its eyes. Luo Jiuqin patted its head. "It's just a few dozen people. You feel sorry for them." The black python's voice was stiff. "There are subjects after all," Luo Jiuqin chuckled. "Idiot, do you think they're really loyal to you now? They just want to borrow your strength to go home. If you really take them in as your subordinates, they'll betray you faster than anyone else once you're in trouble." He flew down and stood by the stream. His fingers drew in the air, and a moment later, dozens of transparent souls were pulled out of the water. The black python watched helplessly as the souls of its subjects were rolled into a ball by this elegant high lord, and then swallowed like a pill. During this time, it could hear the wails and screams of the souls as they were squeezed. Its body trembled slightly, but it didn't dare to make a sound. Luo Jiuqin finished the soul ball and sighed. "So little. It's not enough to fill the gaps between my teeth. I'm so hungry." His eyes turned to the black python. The black python stiffened under his gaze. "Lord. Lord." Luo Jiuqin walked over slowly and patted its head. "Don't be afraid. As long as you're loyal to me, I won't treat you badly. I'll still support you to be the lord of the underworld. The black python lowered its head. Thank you. Its body trembled slightly. Luo Jiuchen smiled and seemed to think of something. A green pill appeared in his palm and he gently fed it to the black python. Is your injury hurting again? Here, this is the antidote. The black python hurriedly swallowed it. A moment later, its trembling body finally returned to normal. Its eyes were filled with resentment. Lord, will all the people who came in this time die? Luo Jiuchen corrected it. You and I won't die. He smiled leisurely. Do you feel sorry for your father and your subjects? The black python paused and said coldly, Lord, you said that to achieve great things, one must not care about trifles. One must know how to give up. Not bad. You're worth teaching. Luo Jiuchen praised him. Only 10,000 people have been trapped this time. Compared to the hundreds of thousands of people in the underworld, this is just a drop in the ocean. You will have enough officials in the future. Then, my lord, that girl, she will also stay here forever, right? Luo Jiuchen narrowed his eyes. He naturally knew who the girl, the black python, was referring to. He smiled faintly and didn't say anything. There seemed to be wind and clouds swirling in his eyes. He turned around and jumped onto the back of the black python. He said faintly, let's go. We still have a lot of things to do. Black Python was not satisfied that he did not get the answer he wanted. My lord, that girl has repeatedly ruined your plans. She's the most restless one. If she doesn't die, I'm afraid she'll affect your grand plan. Luo Jiuchen kicked it with the tip of his foot. There was still a smile in his voice, but his words were icy. Do you think you have the right to interfere in my affairs? The black python's bones were about to be broken by his kick. Its scales were trembling. Although it was unwilling, it did not dare to say anything. It could only continue to crawl forward with him on its back. Luo Jiuchen waved his fan and looked forward. There was a smile on his lips, and there seemed to be waves of light flowing in his eyes. Chapter 22:43. No one could guess what he was thinking. Perhaps even he didn't understand it. Did he love little Shuemo now? Or was it an obsession because he couldn't get what he wanted? This time, he would force her into a corner and make her give in to him. Little Shuemo, you are mine. I was clearly the one who met you first. That person was born with everything. He could get whatever he wanted. As a sub-god, he couldn't get anything. Power, women, and the worship of the 6 realms. Finally, that person died. Finally, he made a name for himself, but he still couldn't get what he wanted. Even that broken stone didn't recognize him. Since that was the case, he would climb to that high position with his own efforts and become the strongest person in the 6 realms. He wanted all the people in the 6 realms to be his slaves. As for that broken stone, when he found it again, he would directly cut it into pieces. Since the heavenly Tao didn't recognize him, he would become the heavenly Tao. This was Luo Jiuchen's idea and purpose. In order to achieve this purpose, he would do anything. If God blocked him, he would kill God. If Buddha blocked him, he would kill Buddha. Only by becoming the absolute strongest would he be able to obtain what he wanted, anything. Including that girl. He closed his eyes slightly and turned his wrist. A child's blue robe appeared in his palm. She had personally put on this blue robe for him and even tidied his collar. There was still the scent of her fingertips on it. His fingers stroked the blue robe inch by inch as if he was touching the girl's body. The body that made his teeth itch with hate and love. Shuemo, I will wait for you in front. I have prepared a lot of things for you. You will like them. Ning Shuemo shivered for no reason. The hair on her body stood up. It felt like being stared at by a wolf in the dark. It was a very bad feeling. She looked around. She was surrounded by blue walls. She tried her best but couldn't see the end of the cave. She and a few high-ranking generals of the underworld had been walking in this cave for an hour, but they still couldn't find the exit. This cave was so long that it seemed like it would never end. What was worse was that from time to time, all kinds of ferocious beasts would come out of the cave and block their path. Those ferocious beasts came in all shapes and sizes. They were even more bizarre than the ones in his dreams. Moreover, all of them were extremely evil. The strangest thing was that these ferocious beasts didn't seem to have been hiding somewhere before coming out. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. The two sides of the cave were clearly ordinary mountain walls, but in the blink of an eye, a ferocious beast could be seen transforming from the mountain walls, roaring and pouncing towards them. Fortunately, Ning Xiumo's martial arts were extremely high. Before these beasts could even reach her, they were split into two halves by her sword. In addition, those people were not easy to deal with, so these ferocious beasts did not cause any real damage to them. This time, Martial Tai Xuelang was by Ning Xiumo's side. He smashed a ferocious beast to death with his hammer and snorted, "Strange." Just as I was thinking about it, it appeared. Another burly man in blue said, "I'm not afraid of these ferocious beasts, but I'm most afraid of rats." The tall and thin man beside him laughed, "What's so scary about rats?" "Old Chui, you're really..." "Ha, if a group of rats appeared now, I think old Chui would immediately collapse." Before he could finish his words, he heard a squeaking sound coming from the depths of the cave. Chapter 2244. Lao Chui's expression changed drastically. The tall and thin man opened his mouth slightly. "No way. What we fear is coming." Countless small red eyes appeared in the darkness, as dense as the stars in the sky. Lao Chui's scalp went numb. Rats. Yes, rats, and a large group of rats. It was unknown how many thousands of them were running towards them. "Help!" Lao Chui screamed. His tone had changed. He wanted to find a place to hide, but the cave was extremely flat. He couldn't even find a tall stone. Ning Xiumo's heart skipped a beat. She finally knew what the problem was. The monsters in the cave are all from your imagination. The more you fear, the more likely it is to come. Stop thinking nonsense. As she spoke, she tried to imagine a cat eating a rat. She thought that a large group of cats would appear, but she didn't expect that she couldn't even find a cat hair. She had an idea. Could it be that only the things you are afraid of come out from this cave? She immediately said, "Who is afraid of cats? Hurry up and think." Damn it, there were too many rats. Although they couldn't hurt her, she, who had a slight trypophobia, felt her scalp tighten. After a while, no cats appeared. Lao Chui, who was afraid of rats, was embarrassed. "Devil Master, I am only afraid of rats and not cats." The others shook their heads. "Yes, we are not afraid of cats." Ning Xiumo was speechless. She took a deep breath. The rats were about to crawl onto her. She waved her hand and a large fireball appeared. The rats ran into the fireball and were burned to ashes in an instant. These rats were afraid of fire. Ning Xiumo finally let out a sigh of relief. That big fireball followed the direction where the rats came from and rolled forward, crushing all of them into ashes. A moment later, all the rats were gone, and everyone heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, everyone knew the origin of these ferocious beasts. They subconsciously emptied their minds and tried not to think about those ferocious beasts. As a result, fewer and fewer ferocious beasts appeared later on. Ning Xiumo seemed to have thought of something. She immediately ordered Lao Chui, "Hurry back and report to Pluto." Tell him the origin of these ferocious beasts, lest the people there think too much and think of a bunch of ferocious beasts to be attacked. Lao Chui hurriedly agreed and left as fast as he could. After entering this damned place, all the voice transmission talismans had lost their effectiveness, so they had to use the most primitive method to transmit messages. General Leng sighed. As expected, the Devil Master is so thoughtful. This place is really strange. I can actually get whatever I want. If I want food, I can get food. I'm so thirsty and hungry right now. Ever since they came in, they hadn't had a single drop of water. After running around for so long, they were naturally hungry and thirsty. Ning Xuemo also frowned slightly. This place was extremely strange. She had already abstained from eating and would be fine even if she didn't eat for a few years. But at this moment, she actually felt hungry and thirsty, his stomach was twitching, and it was a little painful. If she was like this, what about the others? It seemed that she had to quickly find the array core and break this array. Otherwise, these people would die of thirst and hunger even if they weren't killed by the ferocious beasts here. But where was the array core? She was considered to be experienced and knowledgeable, but this was the first time she had seen this array. Luo Jiuchen, that bastard, was really something. He could actually set up such an abnormal and high-level evil array. Chapter 2245. Of course, the others also thought of this. They were all anxious and rushed forward. The sound of water splashing came from the front. Everyone's eyes lit up and rushed forward. They saw a small stream in front of them. The stream was gurgling, with a cool and sweet fragrance. I'm so thirsty. An impatient man rushed over and wanted to drink it. A ray of light hit his wrist. Ning Xuemo's voice came with the light, you can't drink this water. Why? The man's eyes were as big as copper bells. He took out a silver spoon from nowhere and stuck it into the water. After a while, he pulled it out. The silver spoon didn't change color. It shouldn't be poisonous. Ning Xuemo's voice was slightly cold. Using silverware to test for poison is a practice in the human world. It's absolutely not allowed here. If you believe me, don't question me anymore. That one sentence made everyone shut their mouths. In such a dangerous place, what they needed was absolute obedience to their leader. Only then would they be able to display their greatest strength. If the leader had to explain every order he gave, he was afraid that he would miss every opportunity. Everyone followed Ning Xuemo around the stream and continued to move forward. The stream was indeed not poisonous. However, Ning Xuemo had a very strong sixth sense the moment she saw the stream. She felt that the water must not be drunk. Her sixth sense had always been very sharp. It had saved her life several times. This time was no exception. They ran forward for a while, and a little light appeared in front of them. Could it be the exit of the cave? Everyone's spirits were lifted, and they ran even faster. The sun in the sky was pale like a silhouette. All the mountain peaks were covered in a thick layer of white snow. Nearby, there were ice peaks that rose from the ground, crisscrossing like awls. The cold wind blew the fan-sized snowflakes into the sky. Everyone did run out of the damn cave, but what they saw was such a scene. When the cold wind blew, almost everyone shivered. What the hell is this place? Some people couldn't help but scratch their heads. On the other side of the cave, the grass was luxuriant. It was summer, and people were sweating all over even though they were only wearing a single shirt. Unexpectedly, there was a glacier on the other side of the cave. This was really 2 seasons in one cave. It couldn't be any weirder. General Lang licked his dry lips. Is this snow edible? It was good to moisten his throat with snow. Ning Xuemo raised her hand to catch a snowflake. She brought it to her nose and smelled it. She shook her head slightly. It's the same as the stream water. You can't eat it. She was thirsty too, but she didn't want to lose her life here. Little Shuima, in the end, you still chased after me. Have you finally thought it through and decided to submit to me? A voice came from the mountain peak not far away. Everyone raised their heads and saw a person sitting cross-legged on the peak. His purple robe was particularly eye-catching in the snow, and it also made his handsome face look like it was carved out of white jade. In front of him was a table full of food and wine. There were dozens of plates filled to the brim with delicacies from land, sea, and air. The aroma of the wine mixed with the fragrance of the dishes drifted down and entered the noses of everyone who was hungry. As a result, everyone's stomachs rumbled with hunger. This bastard definitely did it on purpose. He wanted to use this to break down their defenses. The mountain peak was not very high, only about 100 feet high. Therefore, Ning Shuima and the others could clearly see Luo Jiuchen's expression and the table full of food and wine. Chapter 2246. Oh, it smells so good. Luo Jiuchen took a bite of the duck leg and drank the wine in front of him. He smiled like a flower. Do you want to drink and chat with me? Everyone swallowed hard. They knew what Luo Jiuchen meant. Once they drank and chatted with him, it was equivalent to surrendering to him indirectly. Luo Jiuchen, you're despicable. Even if we die of thirst or hunger, we won't give in to you. That's right. You better get rid of that idea of yours. Among the people who followed Ning Shuima, although there was no lack of uncouth men, they were all hot-blooded men. They were unyielding and would rather die than eat food given to them. Luo Jiuchen wasn't angry. He even clapped his hands and gave everyone a thumbs up. Good. You're ambitious. I hope you'll always be so ambitious. He licked his cherry-red lips. Actually, I like to eat the flesh of ambitious people. It must be more delicious than others. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. One of them shouted, "What about the people who left with you?" Luo Jiuchen turned to look at him and didn't answer directly. Did you see a cool stream when you came? So what if I did? Luo Jiuchen smiled. Nothing much. The people you care about are now in the stream and have become part of the water in the stream, everyone. Some people still didn't believe him. Nonsense. We didn't see their bodies at all. Luo Jiuchen tapped his folding fan on his palm. I like cleanliness. How can I let such disgusting things like corpses appear? Even if I want to kill people, I have to find the best way to kill them. For example, turning into water or smoke. Everyone felt cold, and a few of them turned pale. Although they didn't drink the water, they held it with both hands. Now, their hands felt sticky, as if they were stained with blood. Those who held the water couldn't help but wipe their fingers on their bodies. Luo Jiuchen saw their expressions. He closed his folding fan and smiled. You all touched the water. Oh, it will eat your skin. This water likes to corrode people's skin. Those people's expressions changed again, and they felt their fingers itch. They couldn't help but want to cut off their itchy hands with their swords. Don't fall for his illusions. That water doesn't have this kind of poison. Ning Shuima suddenly spoke in a low voice. His clear voice was like an icy spring, causing those who had almost been hit to wake up in an instant. They looked at the swords that had been drawn and shuddered. This Luo Jiuchen was indeed very capable. With just a few words, he had almost hooked them into a nightmare and made them do as he wished. Ning Shuima raised her hand, and a faint blue light swept across everyone's palms. These people felt as if their palms had been thoroughly washed by water, and finally returned to normal. Ha 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 ha, little Shuima, you are indeed very capable. You were actually able to see through my technique. What a pity. Unfortunately, I was only one step away from taking their hands to go with the wine. Everyone looked at their own hands, then looked at Ningshuama. Their eyes were filled with admiration and joy. If it weren't for the Devil Lord, all the people trapped in the underworld would have been annihilated. This Luo Jiuchen was even more cunning than a fox. There were traps everywhere. There were ambushes everywhere. If they weren't careful, they would be wiped out. Chapter 2247. You must have had a hard time coming here. Why don't you come up and have a drink? This seat is purely inviting you. Luo Jiuchen sat there with a smile that could topple kingdoms. Purely. Only a ghost would be pure. Everyone was about to refuse loudly when Ningshuama suddenly raised her eyebrows and answered crisply, "Okay." Her figure flashed, and she pounced toward the mountain peak. She obviously wasn't going to drink. She was going to kill. The sky regicide in her hand drew a beautiful and cruel arc in the air as it swept toward Luo Jiuchen. "Aya, so powerful." Luo Jiuchen chuckled. He suddenly lay down on the ground and disappeared from the ice mountain peak. Everyone, the moment Ningshuama made a move, they thought they would see an earth-shattering battle. They didn't expect that person to escape just like that. Escape. He didn't even make a move against Ningshuama. Everyone felt a sense of loss. They looked at Ningshuama again. She actually put away her sword and circled around the table of food and wine. Marshal Lang and the others hurriedly flew over. "Devil Master, you can't eat this food and wine." Ningshuama looked up at him. "Ha!" Marshal Lang felt pressured when he was stared at by her big, watery eyes. However, he still said dutifully, "That person left without a fight, but left such a big table of food and wine for us. It's obviously a trap. He must have done something to the food and wine." Ningshuama's eyes flashed. She looked at the table of food and wine in a daze. On a hillside, Luo Jiuchen sat casually on a rock. In front of him was a water mirror. The figures of Ningshuama and the group of people appeared clearly in the mirror. The big black python was also coiled there like a small mountain. Its long and narrow eyes were also looking at the water mirror. It couldn't help but ask, "My lord, you must have poisoned the food and wine, right?" Luo Jiuchen shook his fan and chuckled. "Why do you say that?" The big black python said, "It's obvious that you're leaving it for them. But I don't think they'll fall for it. No matter how hungry they are, their lives are more important. They won't eat it." Back then, they didn't even drink that little stream. The smile at the corner of Luo Jiuchen's lips became even more obvious. He suddenly said leisurely, "There's no poison in those dishes." The big black python widened its eyes. "Ha! Why would I set up such a simple trap? They will miss this delicious meal, and when they leave for a while, there will definitely be fierce beasts eating those. Then, they will see that those fierce beasts are all fine, but the delicious wine and dishes are already gone. At that time, their expressions of extreme regret will definitely be wonderful." Luo Jiuchen smiled even more happily, as if he could already see their regretful expressions. He stared at Ningshuama's face. Her little face was a little weathered, and her lips, which used to be like rose petals, were now a little dry, like petals that had lost their moisture. This girl was like a rose full of thorns. If he wanted to pluck her, he had to remove the thorns all over her body. This process might make her suffer, and even make his heart ache. But if he didn't do this, how could he win the beauty back? He looked at the green shirt in his hand again, and a glimmer of light flashed through his eyes. If only she had bought this shirt specially for him, this little girl deserved a lesson. He had never understood what it meant to adapt to circumstances. Ha 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 ha, their expressions will definitely be very wonderful. Especially that foodie General Lang. That guy's eyes will turn green from hunger if he doesn't eat. Now that he hasn't eaten for more than a day, if he misses this meal, he will definitely vomit blood with regret. Chapter 22:48. The big black python also stared at the water mirror excitedly, waiting for those people to leave reluctantly. Unexpectedly, Ning Xuema circled around the table and suddenly reached out to grab a big drumstick and took a bite. It tastes good. Luo Jiuqin, the big black python, General Lang and the others thought that Ning Xuema was confused by hunger, so they rushed forward to snatch it. Devil Master! You really can't eat this. Ning Xuema's body spun around, avoiding those people who were trying to snatch the food. Instead, she boldly sat down. Don't worry. These dishes aren't poisonous. Everyone can eat and drink to your heart's content. There won't be such a good thing later. She picked up the wine pot on the table and took a big gulp. General Lang and the others now had absolute trust in Ning Xuema. Seeing her like this, they immediately sat down. Okay. Then let's have a good meal and hurry on with our journey. The few of them swept away the remaining clouds. A moment later, the table full of food was in their stomachs. The cups and plates were a mess, and there wasn't even a vegetable soup left. General Lang burped contentedly, his face full of admiration. Devil Master, how do you know that the food is not poisonous? Ning Xuema smiled. Have you ever heard of the saying, the real is the fake, and the fake is the real? He probably wanted to see us regret missing out on this meal. Unfortunately. Ha ha ha, unfortunately, he didn't expect us to really eat it. Right now, he must be hiding in some corner, peeking at us and vomiting blood in anger. Another general felt very comfortable. Ning Xuema smiled and stood up. She picked up a plate. Come, on the account that he painstakingly prepared such a table of food for us, let's thank him. With a shake of her hand, the plate flew out and fell on a stone. Luo Jiuqin, thank you. The others followed suit and smashed all the plates and cups on the table into pieces. Every time they smashed something, they would say, thank you. Each word was louder and louder than the last. The big black python couldn't help but look at Luo Jiuqin beside it. The smile on his lips had long disappeared, and his handsome face was a little pale. The fan in his hand was crushed by him. Killing intent seeped out of his body, causing the scales on the large black python to almost stand on end. It quietly moved back, then moved again, for fear of touching the tail of his typhoon. Luo Jiuqin laughed again. She's getting smarter and smarter now. Crafty like a little fox. Don't worry, there are still many good things waiting for her. No matter how crafty the little fox is, she can't escape from the hunter's palm. The big black python watched as Ning Xuema and the others smashed their plates and began to walk deeper into the valley. It was a little puzzled. Where are they going? She doesn't think that the exit is on that peak, does she? Luo Jiuqin looked at the direction Ning Xuema and the others were heading and frowned slightly. Although this formation of his was incomparably complicated, it was still inseparable from the basic principles. It was still inseparable from the arrangement of the 5 elements. There was an array core on the highest peak of the snowy mountain. Could it be that the little girl had already seen through the layout of this grand array? Impossible, right? He had studied this grand array for many years and had never used it before. Moreover, it didn't conform to the layout of ordinary arrays at all. The more proficient one was at setting up arrays, the easier it was to walk into a dead end inside. Luo Jiuqin had suffered a lot from Shinjuli's arrays in his life. Gradually, he had become an array master. This grand array was actually specially designed to deal with Shinjuli. Now, to deal with Ning Xuema and the others, he felt that using a sledgehammer to crack a nut was an overkill. Chapter 2249. Now, it seemed that he was lucky to have used this array, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to trap this girl. He looked up at the sky and his lips curled into a smile. Without the special antidote, even if they sat still in this array, their vitality would be sucked away. Even if they had enough food, they would gradually lose their strength, and at that time, they would still be at his mercy. He sat on the ground and looked at Ning Xuema and the rest as they flew across the snowy ground. His lips curled into a smile again. He watched from where he was. That girl's every move was under his control. She was in the open while he was in the dark. Was he worried that he couldn't subdue her? Seeing that Ning Xuema and the rest had reached the gap between the two mountains, Luo Jiuchen's fingers slightly stretched out as if he wanted to do something but hesitated. After a moment, he seemed to have decided on something. With a flick of his finger, a purple light danced in the air and went straight into the clouds. In the water mirror, there was a loud rumble. A muffled sound came from the two snowy mountains. A gray line rolled up and poured down towards the valley. It was an avalanche. The surging snow carried the power to destroy the heavens and exterminate the earth as it rolled downwards, heading straight for Ning Xuema's group. Luo Jiuchen stared at the water mirror and watched as Ning Xuema and the rest turned and ran the moment they saw the avalanche. Luo Jiuchen chuckled. He knew that the avalanche this time wouldn't take that girl's life. With her speed, she would definitely be able to escape the avalanche. He was only doing this to teach her a small lesson. There would be a big meal later. He glanced at one of the mountains. There was a platform on that mountain. It wasn't far from Ning Xuema and the rest and could be used to avoid the avalanche. He believed that with Ning Xuema's eyesight, she would definitely see the platform and run there, and he had prepared another big meal waiting for her there. The avalanche was like a torrential downpour as it chased closely behind Ning Xuema and the others. Ning Xuema seemed to have seen the platform and even pointed at it. The avalanche was too loud, so Luo Jiuchen couldn't clearly hear what Ning Xuema shouted. However, from her gesture, it seemed like she was calling for everyone to take shelter on the platform. However, a sudden change occurred in an instant. Ning Xuema, who was running like the wind, suddenly tripped over something. With a plop, she fell into the snowy ground. The others subconsciously tried to pull her up, but the result was that they were overtaken by the rolling snow behind them. The rumbling sounds of the avalanche shook the heavens and the earth. The avalanche engulfed everything and directly annihilated those few people. It continued to rush forward. Luo Jiuchen's expression changed. He suddenly stood up. The black python, on the other hand, was in high spirits. Its eyes were wide open as it stared at the snowy surface. After an unknown amount of time, the avalanche finally stopped. Everything was calm again. This time, the avalanche was extremely powerful. More than half of the snow on the two snowy peaks rolled down, and the shape of the entire mountain changed. The place where Ning Xuema and the rest had climbed was covered by countless layers of snow. The black python circled the snow 3 times and did not see anyone coming out of the snow. The water mirror was white and there was no other color at all. Those people were buried under the snow. The black python understood that the snow here was not normal snow. The snow here could also absorb people's elemental energy. Even if one stepped on the snow, their elemental energy would be slowly drained from their boots, making them weak. Not to mention being buried under such snow. Those people buried under the snow, even if they did not suffocate to death, their elemental energy would be quickly absorbed by the snow. They would not even have the strength to get up. Chapter 2250. It had once seen with its own eyes a snow leopard accidentally fall into a snow cave that wasn't too deep. Before it could jump up, it fell limply to the bottom of the pit, unable to stand up. In the end, it became as soft as cotton and didn't even have the strength to breathe. In less than an hour, it was completely dead. If it hadn't taken the antidote Luo Jiuqin gave it in advance, it would have been exhausted after crawling in the snow. In this array, although Ning Xuema and the others still had their skills, they couldn't use half of their strength and couldn't use many spells. Now that they were buried by the avalanche, how could they survive? My lord, they actually died here. The avalanche swallowed them. The black python's voice couldn't hide its excitement. Luo Jiuqin kept staring at the snow, his eyes dark. No one knew what he was thinking. After a moment, he suddenly stood up. Wait here, I'll go take a look. He disappeared in a flash. The black python, Luo Jiuqin had walked around the snow between the two peaks no less than 8 times, especially the place where Ning Xuema and the others were swallowed by the avalanche. He carefully searched. But there was nothing. He couldn't sense any aura from her. Even if she was buried several feet under the snow, as long as she breathed lightly, he would be able to sense it and pull her out in time. But there was nothing. Did she really die like this? Impossible, right? She was the Devil Master. Even if her skills were reduced by half, she wouldn't die so easily. He stood in the snow for a long time, but couldn't find her. He made up his mind and used the spirit summoning spell. Using the spirit summoning spell in the snow would waste several times more mental power than usual. Even Luo Jiuqin didn't want to use it casually here. After a moment, he finished using the spell. He gathered the souls of a few fierce beasts, but there were no souls of Ning Xuema and the others. After a long time, he was still empty-handed. Not only was he not disappointed, his eyes lit up. That girl didn't die. Even her companions didn't die. In that situation, how did she do it? If she didn't die and wasn't under the snow, then where could she have gone? He actually let someone slip away right under his nose. What a cunning girl. Luo Jiuqin exhaled softly. He didn't know if he was relieved or angry. Don't let me catch you again. His eyes flickered slightly. Next time, he would not play the cat and mouse game with her. He would directly put her down and use the most direct method to obtain her. He thought for a moment. With that girl's intelligence, she probably guessed that there was an array core hidden on the mountain peak. At this time, she probably went straight for the array core. He leaped up and headed to the highest point of the mountain. He wanted to go to the eye of the array to take a look. Perhaps he could catch her directly. Deep underground, rocks were everywhere, and drops of water turned into ice. At this moment, Ning Xuema, General Lang, and the others were underground, inside a light green barrier. Ning Xuema's face was exceptionally pale. It was obvious that she had expended a lot of energy. General Lang and the others looked at her with admiration. If she hadn't pulled them to use the earth-burrowing technique at the critical moment, they would probably have lost their lives this time. General Lang and the others usually used this spell, but they couldn't use it after entering this place. They didn't expect Ning Xuema to be able to use it in time and pull a bunch of people along with her. Chapter 2251. In particular, the wizardry barrier she set up to drag them underground was like a rock, and all their breaths were blocked. He was indeed the Devil Lord. His power was unfathomable, and he knew a lot of things. Devil Lord, we could have run to the top of the mountain to hide just now. Why did we waste so much energy to hide underground? Someone finally couldn't suppress the doubts in his heart and asked. Ning Xuema's eyes flashed. We have always been in the light, and he has always been in the dark. Now it's time for us to switch to the dark. You're saying that he's been watching us from the shadows? The general shuddered. Yes. Ning Xuema's sixth sense was very strong. Although she didn't know where Luo Jiuchen was at that time, she could feel his wolf-like eyes following them. If they had been working under his nose, they would not have been able to do anything. So Ning Xuema took advantage of the avalanche to hide their tracks. She stroked the wizardry barrier with her hand. This wizardry barrier technique was taught to her by Shinjiuli. She didn't expect it to come in handy at this time. Once this wizardry barrier was set up, she could sense any movement on the ground, but the people on the ground couldn't find them. She could sense Luo Jiuchen walking back and forth on the ground. Devil Lord, what should we do next? Marshal Leng asked. Ning Xuema said, if I'm right, there should be an array core here. Let's break it first. How can we find the array core? Devil Lord, do you know where the array core is? Ning Xuema curved her lips, I don't know, but someone should take us there this time. Later, everyone should listen to my orders. Don't act on your own. Yes. They said loudly in unison. Ning Xuema narrowed her eyes slightly. Luo Jiuchen, you may be better than me in terms of power, but in terms of scheming, I'm afraid you can't compare with an agent. She manipulated the wizardry barrier and led a group of people to walk silently underground, always sensing Luo Jiuchen's track on the ground. This time, she was in the dark, and he was in the light. The mountainside of the highest peak of the ice peak was also lined with ice towers. It was a typical glacial climate. Luo Jiuchen flew to this place and turned left and right among the ice towers. Finally, he stopped in front of an extremely inconspicuous ice tower. He raised his hand and pushed with a spell. The ice tower silently moved aside, revealing an ice cave below. He flew down. The ice cave was extremely deep and wide, and there were many twists and turns inside. He obviously knew the path, and he didn't hesitate when he stepped onto the fork. A moment later, he finally arrived at an ice hole. There were no ordinary decorations in the hole. There was only a large pool, and there were hundreds of corpses in the pool. Every corpse seemed to have been poisoned when they were alive. Their bodies were ashen green, and their mouths were baring their teeth. Their faces were hideous. It was clear that they had died extremely miserably. The more miserably they died, the more vicious their auras became. It also made the temperature in the hall as cold as the North Pole. It was dozens of degrees below zero. Luo Jiuchen heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the corpses. Thank goodness. The eye of the formation was still there, undamaged. This meant that the girl hadn't arrived yet. He walked around the hall and carefully checked every corner. After confirming that there was nothing unusual, he was relieved. He thought for a moment and seemed to heave a sigh of relief. He muttered to himself, so they haven't found us yet. Then he strode out, and the sound of his footsteps gradually faded away. Chapter 2252. Ning Xuema and the others had been holding their breaths and listening to Luo Yunyang's words in the ice hall. Hearing Luo Jiuchen's words, they looked at each other in confusion. Needless to say, the array core should be up there. The array core was indeed extraordinary. It was also underground, but the temperature here was more than 10 degrees colder than other places. Even in the wizardry barrier set by Ning Xuema, it was terribly cold. None of the people present were weak in martial arts. Originally, the change of weather would not affect them, but here, they were all blue in the cold, and their hands and feet were stiff as if they were not their own. Ning Xuema's face was not much better than theirs. After all, she had done the most in the past 2 days. Even if she was made of iron, she would be tired after working so hard. Marshal Lang and the others were eager to leave the underground and destroy the array core here. Hearing Luo Jiuchen's footsteps going away, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Devil Master, can we go up? That bastard has already checked and left. Ning Xuema pursed her thin lips slightly. Wait. She also heard Luo Jiuchen's footsteps going away, and even heard him walking out of the long and winding tunnel, but she felt that something was wrong. Luo Jiuchen's footsteps seemed to be deliberate. Could it be that he had already guessed that she would follow him here? Her physical strength was also exhausted. She wished she could get out of the ground and remove the wizardry barrier, but she couldn't. At this time, she had to be very cautious. That man was too cunning. She had to be on guard. She waved her hand and asked everyone to shut up. She held her breath and listened to the movement above. It was very quiet above. There was no movement at all. The advantage of Ning Xuema's wizardry barrier was that she could sense every move of the people above, even the frequency of their breathing, but the people above couldn't hear them. As long as they didn't shout in the wizardry barrier, the people outside couldn't hear them. When she quietly followed Luo Jiuchen, Ning Xuema could hear Luo Jiuchen's shallow breathing, but now she couldn't hear it at all. It seemed that he had really left. Luo Jiuchen returned. However, he had entered silently without making a sound. He had even held his breath, allowing the temperature of his body to drop along with the temperature of the hole. He was almost at the same temperature as the people in the pool. He walked forward slowly and circled the hole again. He then sat down in a secluded corner of the hole. Sometimes, it wasn't a bad idea to wait for the rabbit to appear. He believed that with Ning Xuema's sensitivity towards arrays, she would be able to find this place. He wondered how she would react when she saw him, who was already waiting for her here. The hole was extremely cold, but Luo Jiuchen was not afraid at all. On the contrary, the coldness here seemed to be nourishing him. He closed his eyes and sat cross-legged, making a very complicated hand gesture. Strands of cold air from the corpse in the pool were attracted to him and slowly entered his body. His originally pale face had a slight redness to it. He had already held his breath. His body was as cold as the objects in the hall, but his skin was white and rosy, like a fine jade carving. Dozens of feet underground. Marshal Lang and the others were cold and suffocated here. Naturally, they felt very uncomfortable. They kept looking at Ning Xuema, hoping that she could rush out of the ground as soon as possible. Monthly votes, recommendation votes, moi. Chapter 2253. After waiting for about an hour, there was still no movement from above. Marshal Lang finally couldn't help saying in a low voice, "Devil Master, that guy must have left. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stayed quiet for so long. We clearly heard that he had gone out just now. Now is a good opportunity. If we miss this opportunity, I'm afraid that he will come back again. At that time, I'm afraid that there will be a lot of changes. Yes, Devil Master, it's now or never. You'd better make a decision as soon as possible. It doesn't matter even if we meet this guy. His kung fu doesn't seem to be as good as we thought. We may be able to fight him together. This array must be broken as soon as possible. It's been almost 2 days. I'm afraid that those who are still waiting in the cave can't wait." Ning Xuema sighed softly. She listened carefully again. Indeed, there was no movement from above. It was like a dead land. She was about to say, "Let's go up." Suddenly, the surrounding rocks shook as if there was an earthquake. The rocks intertwined, and Ning Xuema and the others, who were unprepared, almost fell down. Ning Xuema hurriedly stabilized the enchantment that was almost broken. What was going on? Was it an earthquake? Before she finished thinking, she heard a sudden sound from above. Luo Jiuchen cursed in a low voice, "Damn it. That girl actually used a diversion tactic to destroy the formation core on the west side of this seat." The breeze was blowing, and Luo Jiuchen's footsteps were light and hurried. He rushed out of the hall and went away again. Ning Xuemo. It turned out that Luo Jiuchen was really waiting here. Marshal Lang and the others were also shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. If they had rushed up blindly just now, they would have met Luo Jiuchen on a narrow path. How could that bastard be silent for so long? This time, Ning Xuemo didn't delay any longer. She manipulated the enchantment to go up directly. Finally, they came out of the ground and found themselves in a large dark blue ice hall. They shivered as soon as they came up. It was so fucking cold. The moment they ascended, the enchantment that Ning Xuemo controlled also broke. She had used up too much of her strength and mind power, and she was seeing stars. Her body swayed slightly, and her hand subconsciously reached out to hold on to a stone pillar beside her. However, she quickly withdrew her hand with a hiss. It was too cold. Her hand almost froze off a layer of her skin. A young general standing beside her saw that her body was slightly swaying and her expression was not good. His heart skipped a beat. Ning Xuemo had always appeared as the Devil Master. To these people, she was an aloof and remote deity that they had to lower their heads to whenever they saw her. Everyone here revered her and treated her as their protective amulet. Now that they saw her like this, they remembered that she was actually just a little girl. Although Ning Xuemo already had a son, no matter if it was her appearance or her figure, she still looked like a 16 or 17-year-old girl. Her face was young and tender, and her pair of big watery eyes were full of life. When she smiled, there were 2 dimples on her cheeks, making people want to protect her. Now that he saw her pale face, the young general suddenly had a man's desire to protect her. He raised his hand and wanted to help her. Devil Lord, are you okay? Before his fingers touched Ning Xuemo's arm, she had quietly stepped back half a step. The young general didn't catch her. Ning Xuemo glanced at him. It was just a casual glance, but the young general felt as if there was an ice stream washing him from head to toe. He quickly stepped back and finally remembered that she was the Devil Lord. Chapter 2254. The general's heart trembled and he stuttered, I just saw that you don't look well. He really didn't mean any harm, he just wanted to help her. Ning Xuemo waved her hand and said, I'm fine. Then, she bypassed him and continued walking forward. She naturally knew that the general didn't have any improper thoughts. She just didn't know why she didn't want to have any physical contact with other men. It was as if she was subconsciously protecting that person. Realizing this, she smiled bitterly in her heart. It turned out that when you really loved someone to the extreme, you would hate to be touched by anyone other than that person. Originally, she was so free and unrestrained in the modern world and always walked with her good friends shoulder to shoulder. Now, she couldn't help but become a chaste woman in ancient times. Of course, this thought just flashed in her mind. Now was not the time to think about these messy things. Fortunately, we didn't come out just now. It turns out that that guy has been waiting for us here. Marshal Lang still had some lingering fear when he thought about it. That's true. What was the earthquake just now? From what that guy said, it seems that his array in the west was destroyed. Did His Majesty send someone else to find the exit? Maybe. After all, there are only a few of us here. There can't be a third party. Ning Xuemo said in a low voice, it's not one of us. All eyes were on her, waiting for her to continue. Ning Xuemo was walking around the pool. She stared at the corpses in the pool and said, to destroy the array core here, the person who did it would need to be at least at heaven rank level 8. It must be the same for the other array cores. Everyone was speechless. The top masters in the underworld were only at heaven rank level 7, not level 8. In the entire 6 realms, there were only 4 or 5 people who could reach this level. The former Divine Lord, the current Demon Lord, the demonized Lord Overlord, the Sky Emperor and Yi Tianli before they were injured, the Divine Lord had disappeared, and the Demon Lord was here. Luo Jiuqin wouldn't destroy their array. Could it be the missing Sky Emperor or Yi Tianli? Everyone was bewildered, but they also breathed a sigh of relief. In any case, it was better to have one more helper than one more enemy. Especially with such a powerful helper. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Ning Xuemo said, "Don't worry about who the helper is. Let's destroy this place first." Everyone present had been on the battlefield for a long time. They were used to seeing corpses, so they didn't have much of a reaction when they saw the pile of corpses in the pool. Just looking at the expressions of those corpses made his scalp tingle. How much did he have to suffer to die so miserably? Luo Jiuqin was a demigod, wasn't he? How could he be 100 times more ferocious than a normal demon after being demonized? No one dared to waste any more time. Following Ning Xuemo's instructions, they stood in all 4 directions of the pool, ready for battle. After Ning Xuemo gave a few simple instructions, she flew up and circled around the pool. The sky splitter in her hand slammed on each corpse, causing each corpse to turn around and face the center of the pool. Although Ning Xuemo had never seen the layout of this array core, she vaguely remembered that when she was a secret agent in the modern era, she got a tattered book in Miaojiang. It recorded some ancient evil array diagrams. At that time, she flipped through it out of boredom. Her memory was so good that she could remember most of it. Chapter 2255. Because the method of setting up the array was too evil, she did not think that she would need to use it in the future. She threw it in the deepest part of her mind and almost forgot about it. Now that she saw the layout here, she dug it out again. The corpses in the eye of the array should be the experts of the 6 realms when they were alive. They used a special method to make their bodies as cold as ice, and the resentment of their souls formed this ice and snow array. Fortunately, the book also mentioned the method to break this array. When she read it, she thought that it was nonsense, but now it seemed to be true, so she tried her best to give it a try. After she turned all the corpses around, she drew a talisman in her palm and slapped it on the tallest corpse in the middle of the pool. The corpse sank into the ground, but a terrifying rumbling sound came from the ground. The ground under their feet was shaking as if there was a strong earthquake. The few people standing in the 4 corners were almost shaken to the point of falling into the pool. They hurriedly took up stakes to steady themselves, and couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. This rumbling sound was very similar to the one they had heard underground. It seemed that someone really destroyed the array in other places in advance. Damn it. The strong tremor just now alarmed Luo Jiuqin, which made him leave. Now there was another tremor here. Would Luo Jiuqin come back? A moment later, they no longer had the time to think about those messy things, because following this sound, a thick white jade pillar rose up from the pool. With the rise of the white jade pillar, all the corpses in the pool were resurrected. Luo Jiuqin was flying and was about to rush to the west where the strange sound came from. Suddenly, he heard a rumbling sound from the north. His feet suddenly stopped moving. How could there be people on both sides breaking the array at the same time? The only person who had the ability to break the array should be Ning Xuemo alone. Could it be that when he started the array, someone else came in? He quickly went through the people in his mind and suddenly clenched his hands. Yi Tianli. It must be that bastard Yi Tianli. If he had known, he would have found that person and killed him in advance, so as not to ruin his plan. Luo Jiuqin stood in place for a moment, then suddenly let out a long howl, as if he had awakened something or summoned something. Only then did he continue to fly towards the west side of the formation. Under normal circumstances, when the formation eye was destroyed, a ferocious beast guarding the formation eye would appear. These ferocious beasts were all ancient ferocious beasts and were extremely powerful. In addition to the resurrection of those ferocious corpses, in order to truly break the eye of the formation, he needed to completely purify the ferocious corpses and kill the ferocious beasts. It was not easy to do all this. It would be impossible to do it without 6 to 4 hours. Therefore, he decided to first deal with the formation breaker in the west and then go to the north to take a look. Of course, just to be on the safe side, he had summoned the black python and another helper to the north to stop those formation breakers. Luo Jiuchen's eyes flashed. If it was Ning Xuema and the others in the west, it would be fine, but if it was Yi Tianli, he would use the cruelest method to kill this person and then turn him into the most powerful corpse to become his right-hand man and help him conquer the 6 realms. After a quarter of an hour, he finally reached the formation eye in the west. Then, he stood there as if he had been struck by lightning. The west side was the formation eye of the metal attribute. Everything here was golden. Even those ferocious corpses were killed by a special kind of mercury. Their bodies were covered with golden scales and they were not afraid of any magical weapons. Chapter 2256. As for the guardian beast, it was even more incredible. It was called the Devouring Sky. Wherever it appeared, not a single hair was left because it was swallowed by it. Even if a Tyrannosaurus Rex rushed towards it, it would be swallowed alive within a few seconds. No matter who it was, they would have a big headache facing it. If they wanted to completely destroy it, they would need to lose a few layers of skin. Even Luo Jiuchen himself had to ask himself if he had to fight against it for at least 2 hours. From the time he heard the sound of the array breaking to the time he rushed here, it took less than 2 hours. When he came to the periphery of the array core hall, he could still hear the fierce roars and fighting sounds of the fierce beasts inside, but now, the scene that appeared in front of him made him dumbfounded. The devouring sky was still there, and its body was more than 10 times bigger. The entire golden hall was filled with its huge body, and those fierce corpses were nowhere to be found. At this moment, the devouring sky was slamming into the pillar in the middle of the golden pool with its blood-red eyes. The moment Luo Jiuchen arrived, the devouring sky had just knocked down the pillar. Rumble, crash. Not only did the golden hall collapse, but even the mountain peak below the golden hall collapsed as well. The west side of the array core was completely destroyed. It was broken. Moreover, it was broken by someone who used a very simple method. The person who broke the array didn't intend to fight with the golden corpses and the devouring sky. Instead, he used some kind of beast-controlling technique to control the devouring sky, making it swallow all the golden corpses that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Then, he made the devouring sky knock down the pillar that even a few elephants couldn't knock down. The reason why the devouring sky knocked into the pillar was that the golden corpses were highly toxic. A scale on the golden corpses could poison a whale to death, and a claw from it would directly turn it into pus. The devouring sky had swallowed hundreds of such highly toxic things, so it was naturally poisoned. Under the poison, it had a splitting headache, so it slammed into the pillar fell, and the devouring sky was like a lamp that had run out of oil. It fell to the ground with a bang, and the collapsed mountain collapsed again. Simple. Straightforward. Precise. It was unexpected. Luo Jiuchen didn't even see whether the person who broke the array was a group or a flat one, and the array was broken. He was so angry that his face turned green. Who on earth could use such a wicked method? More importantly, who could control the sky-devouring beast? The heaven-devouring beast would only recognize one master in its entire life. Once it recognized its master, everyone else would be its enemy. Luo Jiuchen had spent a tremendous amount of effort to tame this heaven-swallowing beast from the depths of the earth. It should be said that other than him, it shouldn't listen to anyone else. Who was the person who broke the array? He actually had such an ability. Not only did he know how to decipher formations, he also possessed profound beast-taming techniques and bewitching techniques. Luo Jiuchen went through all the experts he knew in his mind. Human Sovereign, Demon King, Beast Emperor, Yi Tianli, Ning Xuemo. None of them seemed to meet these requirements. The Beast Emperor might be able to do it, but his skills were not that high. He could not open the seal on his own and release the glutton Leviathan unless he had the help of an expert who could break the formation. Could it be that Yi Tianli and the Beast King worked together to do this? However, even though the Beast Emperor looked mighty, he wasn't very courageous. He was more like a fence-sitter, leaning towards whichever side was stronger. Such a person dared to go against him at this moment. But other than these two people working together, Luo Jiuchen really couldn't think of a third person. Chapter 2257. After all, in his heart, Shinjiuli's soul had already scattered, and he wouldn't run out to make trouble again. He quickly circled around the collapsed mountain 3 times, trying to smell the breath of the person who broke the array. But the person who broke the array was extremely cunning and didn't leave any breath. He couldn't find any information about the person who broke the array nearby. Just as he was feeling a little anxious, the big black python's long roar suddenly came from the extreme north. Luo Jiuchen was shocked. Damn it! In his anger, he forgot that the northern array core had also been entered by someone. His figure rose and rushed towards the north. The guardian beast of the northern array core was Tao Tai. Although Tao Tai was also gluttonous, he was not interested in those ice corpses. If they wanted to break the northern array core, they had to get rid of these 2 kinds. The person who broke the array couldn't let Tao Tai and the ice corpses kill each other. The other side should be able to hold on for a little longer, right? With Ning Xuemo's current strength, she could at most fight the Tao Tai to a draw. As for the 6 underworld generals by her side, they could deal with 1 ice corpse each. However, there were no less than 680 ice corpses. Each of the generals had to deal with over 100 of them. Therefore, not to mention those ice corpses, it was already very good for those underworld generals to protect themselves among the ice corpses. Everything else was just empty talk. In addition, the big black python had also rushed over. Ning Xuemo and her party wanted to completely destroy the array core over there, but it was undoubtedly a fool's dream. This was also the reason why Luo Jiuchen was not anxious even though he knew that Ning Xuemo and others had gone to break the array. He knew that she couldn't break it. It could only consume her physical strength and kung fu. Of course, her companions would also be consumed. In the end, she would be left alone and couldn't do anything. Luo Jiuchen was very confident at first, but after the western array core was broken by someone using this strange method, he couldn't keep calm anymore. Would the person who broke the array in the west also run to the northern array core to help Ning Xuemo and others? With that person's strange method of breaking the array, maybe he could break another one for him in a very short time. Ning Xuemo deeply felt that it was better to have no books than to believe in all books. This saying was too damn true. Back then, the title and words of the scroll she saw were mysterious and grand. It even had the aura of an ancient master. However, when she tried to decipher it according to what it said, it was too fucking ridiculous. It said that the north was of the water attribute, and the guardian ferocious beasts in the north were generally of the water attribute. They should be 1,000-year-old flood dragons. As for the ice corpses, they were like walking corpses. They had no thoughts and no brains. Apart from their great strength and savagery, they had no other advantages. Therefore, Ning Xuemo automatically thought of these ice corpses as the slow-moving zombies she had seen in zombie movies. They were zombies whose heads could be blown off with a single blow of an axe. As for the 1,000-year flood dragon, although it was powerful, it was nothing in the eyes of the current Ning Xuemo. A few days ago, she even killed a 5,000-year flood dragon. He was still using pure swordsmanship without using any spells at all. Therefore, she didn't have any psychological pressure about the 1,000-year flood dragon that might jump out here. She was ready to kill it as soon as it appeared. As for those frozen corpses, Marshal Lang and others were enough. At worst, she could help to kill them after killing the flood dragon. Her plan was very good. However, even though the ideal was plentiful, the reality was not the same. She hit the totem pole that represented the array core with her palm. After that, all the frozen corpses were resurrected in an instant and jumped straight out of the water to the shore. They all moved as fast as the wind. Chapter 22:58. All the ice corpses were resurrected in an instant and jumped straight out of the water onto the shore, each of them moving as fast as the wind. Each of them had extraordinary strength, each of them was highly poisonous, and each of them waved their claws with the sound of wind and thunder. Ice corpses being able to control water was one thing, but what was going on with them being able to control thunder? So many zombies being able to summon thunder and lightning balls with just a wave of their hands was very heaven-defying the logical, okay? What was even more ridiculous was that the guardian beast that emerged from the totem pole was not a flood dragon, but a monster that Ning Xuema had never seen before. Its body was like a sheep, but it was 100 times bigger than a sheep. On its head, there were curved horns like sharp knives. Under the 2 curved horns was the face of a mighty uncle, and there were 2 bulging cyan bumps where the eyes should be. It had a big mouth with jagged tiger teeth. It obviously had the body of a sheep, but it had 4 human hands. It was just that the hands were not beautiful, and the fingernails on the fingers were blue and purple, like ghost claws. What was even stranger was that as soon as the beast jumped out, it let out a long howl. The howl was like the scream of a baby when it was frightened, making Ning Xuema's scalp tighten uncontrollably. As soon as the monster appeared, it occupied most of the hole. It suddenly raised its front paw at Ning Xuema, and Ning Xuema saw a row of bright eyes under its armpits. There were more than a dozen eyes in that row. More than a dozen eyes with more white eyeballs than black eyeballs were staring at her, making the hair on Ning Xuema's back stand on end. Damn, although she did not have a terrible trypophobia, she still felt scared when she saw such a row of eyes. Ah! In order not to make herself panic, the moment the monster raised its arm and revealed its eyes, Ning Xuema had already shot a row of ice needles at it. Each needle was aimed at an eye, wanting to blind it and be done with it. But before her row of ice needles could reach the monster sneezed, and all the ice needles turned into mist and disappeared in an instant. Ning Xuema, Devil Lord, be careful. It's Tao Tai. It's the Tao Tai. There was still a knowledgeable person in the underworld who shouted. But soon, he no longer had the time to shout. He was surrounded by 70 to 80 ice corpses, which made it hard for him to breathe. This general of the underworld was also someone who could kill his way through an army of thousands. In his life, he had dealt with countless zombies and walking corpses. He had even killed many of those flying zombies that could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. But this was the first time he had seen such a perverted person. All the magic weapons were useless against them. They would immediately jump back up and rejoin the battle. Fire spells wouldn't work either. These guys had a layer of ice armor on their bodies. Fire couldn't burn them at all. Moreover, there was poison all over their bodies. With a wave of their claws, a lightning ball could be smashed down. Furthermore, he couldn't use his weapon to block it, because the fine iron sword in his hand was conductive. In a situation where he had no other choice, he once used his sword to flick away one of them, electrocuting him so much that his hair stood on end. One ice corpse was enough to give him a headache, but now he was surrounded by a group of ice corpses. One of them could directly tear him apart with a scratch of its claws. There was really no other way. The generals summoned a protective magic weapon. The magic weapon was like a leather bag, covering his whole body inside. The claws of the ice corpses scratched the outside of the bag, making his scalp tingle. The other people were not much better. Each of them was surrounded by the ice corpses. After using various spells, they could not hurt them at all, so these people also chose to defend. Chapter 2259. It had to be said that as a general of the underworld, his martial arts were very unique. Because of their physical strength, although their attack power was not the strongest, their defense power was definitely the best. At their level, everyone had a protective treasure. At this moment, they used it one after another. It was like a mushroom flower that bloomed among the ice corpses. Devil Master, what should we do? These ice corpses are too powerful. We can't find their weak points. Devil Master, I'm afraid we are no match for these monsters. Why don't we run away? Devil Master, let's leave first and think of a way. After these generals of the underworld opened their protective treasures, although they still needed a lot of strength to support this treasure, at least they had time to say a few words. Ning Xuema simply wanted to curse. Run away. Run away my ass. She was now being chased by this Tao Tai. She had heard of this Tao Tai, the leader of the ancient beasts. It was said that it could swallow the sun, the moon, and the stars. It was also extremely fierce and could even bite its master at any time. She had heard Bai Zai mention this beast before. Bai Zai said that among the beasts, Tao Tai was the most abnormal one. The 8 mythological beasts were no match for it even if they joined forces. Back then, they had suffered a great loss under the claws of Tao Tai. Their flesh was bitten by it and they almost lost their lives. The 8 mythological beasts hated this beast so much, but they could not do anything to it. It was because the disaster it caused was too big and too deep. It could often swallow half a human village in one bite. It was said that Shinjioli had tried to get rid of it in the past, but it was too cunning and had an abnormal sense of smell. After it suffered a great loss under Shinjioli's hands and escaped, it refused to be seen by Shinjioli again. Even from 100 miles away, it could smell the wind and flee. Moreover, its ability to escape and hide was top-notch. Once it escaped, even Shinjioli would have a hard time finding it. Later, this beast disappeared and never appeared in the 6 realms again. Bai Zai and the rest thought that it had done too much evil and finally suffered the wrath of heaven. Who would have thought that he would appear here? Ning Xuema's kung fu was one of the best in the 6 realms. If she met this Tao Tai outside, she might be able to have an earth-shattering battle with it. But now that she was in this strange array, she couldn't use half of her psychokinesis. After running around for so long, her stomach was growling, and her physical strength was greatly depleted. Under such circumstances, she would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage if she were to fight the number 1 ancient ferocious beast. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. When this Tao Tai sneezed, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. The row of eyes under the Taotia's armpits were also not for decoration. With a casual blink, a golden lightning would strike. What's more, there were so many ice corpses around, and they would occasionally attack her with their claws. Therefore, Ning Xuema was in a very difficult situation. Ning Xuema dodged left and right in the midst of the ice corpses. She had already raised her speed to the maximum, but she still couldn't escape. She naturally saw the situation of the underworld generals. She also had an idea to lead Tao Tai to the pile of ice corpses, wanting to let Tao Tai and the ice corpses have a dog-eat-dog fight. However, this Tao Tai and the ice corpses were very good brothers. They had an extremely tacit understanding with each other. Even if Tao Tai launched a fan-shaped attack, it couldn't attack the ice corpses. Similarly, the poisonous claws of the ice corpses wouldn't grab the wrong target, so they wouldn't attack Tao Tai. Moreover, this Taotai was also very unyielding. He was only interested in the leaders and kings. Chapter 2260. Moreover, this Taotai was also very stubborn. It was only interested in the leader and the king. It did not care about the netherworld generals who trespassed into its territory. In the process of chasing after Ning Xuemo, if a netherworld general's mushroom umbrella happened to block its path, it would use its claw to tear the mushroom umbrella apart and push it to the side. It did not even look at the netherworld general who was pale with fright. It continued to chase after Ning Xuemo. Taotai was very similar to Yazi. Once it set its eyes on someone, it would be stronger than a dog's skin plaster. It would definitely not let go. If Ning Xuemo did not rely on her strange body movements and abnormal speed, she was afraid that she would not be able to escape from it. This Taotai had a huge body, but its flexibility was comparable to that of a monkey. It jumped up and down, dashed left and right, and came and went quickly. It was simply dazzling. In addition, it always had thunder and lightning with it. Ning Xuemo was completely chased by it. Not to mention killing it, it was even more difficult to escape from its claws. Escape. She also wanted to escape temporarily, but she could not find an opportunity. She was in a hurry and used the ground drilling technique. However, after the Taotai came out, the ground was like a diamond. She could not escape at all. She used the ground drilling technique, but she almost hit the ground. She was caught by 3 to 5 ice corpses, and her toes were also hit by the thunder and lightning balls of the Taotai. If she did not have the protection of her body, half of her feet would have been gone. Even so, her toes were burning with pain. It felt like being hit by a hammer. It was so painful that she wanted to stomp her feet. Damn it! She had always been chased by people in her life, but this was the first time that she was chased by a beast to such an extent. Her sky splitter sword was useful in dealing with the ice corpses. In the process of fighting with the Taotai, she also killed about 10 of them. However, there were too many ice corpses. Expiating the souls of these corpses would not solve the actual problem. What should she do? What should she do? At this time, she could not find a good solution. Her heart was cold. Was she going to die here? No. She still had a son. No matter how hard it was, she could not die. Otherwise, Nianma would become an orphan again. The image of Nianma's big, teary eyes flashed in front of her eyes. His body gained a lot of strength out of nowhere. She sent an ice corpse flying with her sword and was about to turn around and stab the Taotai again to find its weak point. Suddenly, the melodious sound of a flute drifted through the air. The sound of the flute had its own unique melody. It sounded like the waves crashing against the shore, or the wind blowing through the bamboo forest. The sound of the flute was originally clear and bright, but this time, it was very low, and it was very thin. The ice corpses that were beating up Ning Xuemo's group suddenly trembled. One by one, they stopped. Even the Taotai suddenly pricked up its ears. Unexpectedly, it no longer cared about attacking Ning Xuemo. It raised its 2 front paws, revealing 20 pairs of eyes under its armpits. Rumble, 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 it looked left and right, as if it was looking for the person playing the flute. Ning Xuemo was also stunned when she heard the sound of the flute. Her head exploded, and blood rushed to her head. The sound of the flute. This flute sound. Could it be? Could it be? It was him. Did he really come? Did he come back to life? When she jumped into the black hole to seal Zisha, she swore that even if he was immortalized, he would be reborn in half a year. Now, almost 4 months had passed. 4 months of suffering was like 400 years, but it was less than half a year. Chapter 2261. Now nearly 4 months had passed. 4 months of torment was like 400 years, but it was less than half a year. Would he really be reborn? That heavenly stone really didn't trick her. At this moment, countless questions flashed through Ning Xuema's mind. Her little heart almost jumped to her throat, and her limbs were somewhat soft. Fortunately, Tao Tai and the ice corpse were attracted by the sound of the flute and didn't take the opportunity to attack her absent-mindedly. Ning Xuema's mind was muddled. Her blood rushed to her head and she wanted to rush out of the door to see where the flute player was. But as luck would have it, that Tao Tai's huge body was blocking the entrance, completely blocking it. Not to mention Ning Xuema, even a piece of paper wouldn't be able to squeeze out. Tao Tai's weak point is the 6th eye under its left and right armpits. It can be broken with a needle. Ning Xuema suddenly heard a voice. That voice was tender, and it was the voice of a 10-year-old child. Ning Xuema's whole body stiffened, and her mouth opened slightly. She had never heard this voice before. Even the accent was unfamiliar. It wasn't him. Wasn't it him? But this flute sound. No. This was actually the first time she heard this kind of flute sound, and she was not familiar with it. Her heart was like a pot of boiling oil, but now it was like a bucket of ice water was poured over the pot of oil. She couldn't tell if it was cold or hot. Her heart was originally trembling in her throat, but now it was slowly sinking, almost sinking into an unfathomable abyss. In this world, Shinjiuli was not the only one who used music to control beasts. Luo Jiuchen could do it, Yi Tianli could do it, and it was said that there was also a mysterious person who lived in seclusion all year round who could do it. Even she could do it a little. She could use music to kill people, and she could also attract some rare birds and beasts. But it was because the music was too beautiful that it attracted them, but it couldn't be used to control them. The owner of this flute sound might not be Shinjiuli, but the mysterious person in the rumors. If it was him, how could he only appear with the flute sound? He should have appeared with his whole body. The hope that had just risen was ruthlessly broken. Even Ning Xuema, who had experienced countless disasters, was also momentarily absent-minded. However, she reacted quickly and quickly regained her senses. Now was not the time to think about this. Breaking the formation was the most important thing. Hair needle. Using hair as needles. Ning Xuema didn't have time to think. She pulled out a few strands of hair and with a flick of her finger, the strands of hair instantly broke into countless pieces and flew out. Hair was originally the softest thing in the world, but when Ning Xuema flicked it out, it was not inferior to any divine weapon. Countless strands of hair accurately shot into Tao Tai's corresponding eyes. Wah, wah. A series of ear-piercing cries resounded from Tao Tai's body. This guy jumped several feet into the air. With a rumbling sound, the ceiling of the ice hall trembled from the impact. Then, countless huge ice cubes fell, as if it was raining ice cubes. Ning Xuema casually brushed off the falling ice cubes. The sound of the flute continued. The ice corpses seemed to be under the control of the flute and were intoxicated. Even if they were hit by ice cubes, they would immediately jump up and sway in the direction of the flute sound like sunflowers, as if they were doing a square dance. Ning Xuema thought that once Tao Tai's weak point was pierced, he would directly die. She didn't expect that this guy would not die after falling down, but instead go crazy. His 2 front claws were crazily waving around, and the 20 eyes under his armpits were all blood red. They were desperately rotating, but as if they were blind, they couldn't see anything. Chapter 2262. When a Tao Tai went berserk, its destructive power was absolutely astonishing. It could no longer tell whether it was an ally or an enemy. As long as it sensed something moving in front of it, it would slap it. No matter who blocked its way, only death awaited them. Those ice corpses were no exception. Ning Xuema and the underworld generals were all very slippery and had already quietly retreated. Only those ice corpses, controlled by the sound of the flute, swayed toward Tao Tai, and were smashed in the head by the crazy Tao Tai. General Lang and the others were speechless. Heavens, the person playing the flute is so powerful. He didn't even need to show up, yet he could make these most ferocious creatures bite each other here. Ning Xuema's heart was on fire. She had already heard that the sound of the flute was coming from outside, but she had no clear sense of direction. It seemed to be left or right, front or back. She didn't know where that person was at all. However, that person seemed to be able to see the scene in the hall. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to command those ice corpses to stretch out their necks and move toward Tao Tai. The ice corpses were poisonous. Although Tao Tai could smash them with his claws, the poison of the ice corpses would inevitably contaminate his claws. Because his eyes hurt, he would rub them with his claws from time to time, so the poison of the ice corpses would also enter his wounded eyes. Tao Tai's roars and screams were even more earth-shattering and frantic. Not only were more than half of the ice corpses destroyed by it, even the core pillar of the formation was crazily attacked by it several times because it had blocked its path several times. Although it hadn't collapsed yet, countless fine lines had appeared on the pillar. As long as it was attacked a few more times, the pillar would be completely shattered, and the formation would be broken. When the big black python received the order to come to the rescue, it saw this scene. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the hall, and all kinds of strange sounds were incessant. Ning Xuema and the others were standing in the passage leading to the hall, watching the bustle with folded arms. The big black python couldn't help but roar in its heart. Didn't the Lord say that Tao Tai and the ice corpses were brothers and would never have conflicts? What was going on now? The big black python's hearing was special. When it turned into its python form, it couldn't receive the sound waves from the flute, so it didn't know what was going on. It had originally received Luo Jiuchen's order to come and check, but now, it only wanted to run away. With its current kung fu, it was no match for Ning Xuema and the others. If it went in, it would only be courting death. It was better to go out and inform the Lord. It came in as a small snake. Now that Ning Xuema and the others' attention was on Tao Tai and the others, they certainly did not see it. It quietly turned around and was about to crawl out again. Swoosh! A streak of red light screamed and arrived, heading straight for the top of its head. That strength, that sound of the wind, simply caused the big black python's soul to scatter. It knew what was good for it. It knew that once the red light pierced its head, it would lose its head. It didn't have time to think carefully in this critical situation. It suddenly rolled over and finally dodged its head. However, it wasn't careful enough to dodge its tail. The red light directly cut into its tail. With a long and mournful cry, a section of the big black python's tail was cut off. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and it revealed its true form on the spot. The several generals of the underworld were stunned at the same time. Holding their weapons in their hands, they didn't know whether to make a move or not. After all, this big black python used to be their young master and also the substitute king of hell. It had once led them to war. Now that it suddenly appeared, they knew that something was wrong, but they didn't dare to make a move for a while. Lead it into the hall. Ning Xuema heard the young man's voice again. Chapter 2263. Her heart skipped a beat. She leaped up and attacked the big black python. At this moment, the big black python was crying out for help as it tried to escape. Unfortunately, Ning Xuema blocked its path. Even if it wasn't injured, it still wouldn't be Ning Xuema's opponent. It was forced to retreat step by step. The generals of the Netherworld watched helplessly. They did not know which side to stop. They looked at each other and decided to just watch from the sidelines. The big black python was pressured by Ning Xuema's attacks to the point that it couldn't breathe. It wanted to force the Netherworld generals to save it, but it couldn't open its mouth. Its huge body retreated with all its might, and in a moment of carelessness, half of its body fell into the ice hall. That Tao Tai was crazily scratching and clawing around when it suddenly stopped and tripped over the big black python's body, causing it to stumble. It was furious and immediately clawed at it. The front half of the big black python's body was fighting with Ning Xuema. It did not expect Tao Tai to go crazy and grab it. There was another long scream. Half of the big black python's body was cut off by Tao Tai's claw. The smell of blood filled the air, which made Tao Tai even crazier. It directly grabbed the big black python. Help! The big black python was scared out of its wits. It screamed and shouted. Young master! General Lang instinctively wanted to step forward. But it was too late. Tao Tai moved faster than lightning. Before General Lang could rush to it, it had already opened its mouth and bit off the big black python's head. The generals of the Netherworld were dumbfounded when they saw this bloody scene. General Lang broke out in a cold sweat. His friend pulled him back and said in a low voice, "Young master has already helped the evildoer. The Netherworld king does not recognize this son anymore." What he meant was that there was no need to take revenge for such a person. General Lang knew this too. He lowered his head dejectedly. "You're right," Ning Xuema heard the voice again. "Bring them to a temple 200 miles to the east. The temple is the eye of the array in the east. Lure the guardian beasts out and run. Do not fight." The voice was faintly discernible, but it was very methodical when it came to assigning tasks. Ning Xuema's heart was beating wildly. She really wanted to find out where the voice came from and what the owner of the voice looked like. However, she also understood that this person must have his reasons for not showing up. Since he was helping her, there was no need to drag him out. "Let's retreat." Ning Xuema only said one sentence and took the lead to rush out. The others naturally followed suit. Along the way, one of the generals could not help but ask, "Devil Lord, to break the eye of the formation, we must topple that pillar, right? We haven't had the time to topple that thing." He had the illusion that they had given up halfway. Ning Xuema said, "Don't worry. That pillar will fall down." If she was right, that person should be the one who broke the array core in the west. Since that person could break the array core in the west so easily, he must have a way to break the array in the north. Moreover, this array was just as she had guessed. There were array cores in the east, west, south, and north respectively. If all 4 array cores were broken, the array would be completely broken. Only then would the people trapped in the array be safe. They had just ascended the snowy peak when they heard an earth-shattering sound coming from the snowy peak. The entire mountain seemed to have been hit by an atomic bomb and completely collapsed. The huge energy during the collapse caused the snowy peak to be filled with snow and fog, like a mushroom cloud rising. The collapse of the snowy peak naturally caused another huge avalanche. Fortunately, Ning Xuema and the others were fast and prepared, so they managed to avoid it without any danger. Chapter 2264. By the time Luo Jiuchen arrived, everything had already been settled. His hands trembled as he looked at Tao Tai, who was lying dead on the ground like a mountain of flesh. His face could no longer be described as ashen. Tao Tai had also been poisoned to death by the ice corpse's poison. He lay there with a ferocious face, as if he had died with his eyes wide open. There was a huge bloody wound on his forehead. Luo Jiuchen dug into the bloody wound, and as he expected, the demon bead inside had disappeared. All these ancient vicious beasts would cultivate a bead with very high energy in their bodies. This bead was the origin of the vicious beast. Once it was taken out, it would die immediately. He had suppressed the vicious beasts in the eye of the array. Firstly, it was to protect the array. Secondly, it was to let the demon beads in their bodies absorb the vitality of everyone trapped in the array, so that their demon beads would become stronger and stronger. This was also the main reason why these vicious beasts were willing to be suppressed here. According to Luo Jiuchen's idea, after the several fierce beasts had sucked all the primordial qi from the people in the array, he would try to absorb the purified primordial qi from their demon pearls. That way, his skills would be greatly improved. But now, the demon bead had been dug out. It had been dug out. He didn't even know who the opponent was. He turned around in a circle, trying to find the aura of the person who had broken the array, but he still couldn't find it. That person's aura was hidden very well, not revealing the slightest clue. He smelled the aura of Ning Xuema and the others here. Obviously, the ones who had broken into the array at the beginning were indeed Ning Xuema and the others. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Perhaps if he caught up with Ning Xuema and the others, he would be able to find out the person behind them. His figure rose and he immediately followed Ning Xuema's aura. But for some reason, the aura of Ning Xuema and the others suddenly disappeared at the foot of the mountain, and he couldn't smell them at all. Obviously, Ning Xuema and the others had also hidden their tracks. Ning Xuema was an expert in anti-tracking. Her means in this respect were not worse than Shinjuli's. Luo Jiuchen circled around the area, but he still couldn't determine where they had gone. He stood in place for a moment, then suddenly sneered, turned around, and rushed to the easternmost eye of the formation. He had been running behind them all this time and had been too passive. He might as well go to the next eye of the formation and wait for the rabbit to appear. As long as one of the eye of the array was protected, the array could not be broken. As long as he protected one of them, he wasn't afraid that Ning Xuema and the person behind her wouldn't come. If he really couldn't hold on, he still had one last trick up his sleeve. Ning Xuema felt that looking for a small temple in a tropical rainforest was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Yes, she was now at the easternmost point. Unlike the world of ice and snow in the north, this place was a tropical rainforest that stretched as far as the eye could see. Her eyes were filled with various shades of green, and the green was so dense that it was almost flowing out. The rainforest was filled with swamps, poisonous snakes, crocodiles, scorpions, centipedes, all kinds of poisonous and ferocious creatures were everywhere. Moreover, the beasts and birds here were all unusually large. He also looked ferocious. Even a lizard could look like a small dinosaur. It looked like a mutated species after Resident Evil. Fortunately, Ning Xuema and the others were all top masters, and these ferocious beasts couldn't stop their footsteps. The problem was that in such a large and endless rainforest, where was the so-called small temple? Ning Xuema thought of the Hall of the Eye of the Formation in the north, and naturally thought that the east side of the Earth Temple should be very big. As long as she flew around the relevant area, she should be able to find it. Chapter 2265. However, she had already circled the treetops more than 10 times in this area. She had even counted the number of tree stumps below, but she still couldn't find any trace of the Earth Temple. In order to find the target as soon as possible, General Lang and the others had already separated from her. It was relatively faster for them to split up. Of course, in order to make it easier for them to contact each other quickly, Ning Xuema taught them several wolf howls. If they encountered great danger, they would howl 3 times. If they found the Earth Temple, they would howl 6 times. This method was the safest. It would not attract Luo Jiuchen's attention, and it could also send the most clear message. General Lang and the others accepted the order and each chose a direction to search. Ning Xuema was an expert in array formations. Based on her past experience, she deduced that the Earth Temple should be within a radius of 10 miles in the middle of this forest. As they were not far away, they could often see the figures of their companions when they flew over the treetops. Everyone felt more at ease. These people moved quickly. They had already searched the forest within a radius of 10 miles, but they still couldn't find any trace of the Earth Temple. Could it be that she had made a mistake? Not to mention those people, even Ning Xuema was a little doubtful. However, according to the activation of the array core should be nearby. If it was wrong, how wrong could it be? Could it be that the helper gave the wrong answer? Was the array core not the Earth Temple? Those people gathered around Ning Xuema again. General Lang couldn't help but ask, Devil Master, how can you be sure that the array core here is in the Earth Temple? Ning Xuema sighed. When the person behind the scenes sent her a voice transmission, he had told her not to reveal any information about him, so she had never mentioned that person's voice transmission. Now that she heard General Lang's question, she still didn't want to reveal it. After thinking for a while, she said, I made a guess based on my past experience. However, the array core should be within a radius of 10 miles. Everyone, look carefully. There's no need to look for any temple. Even those tree holes and underground holes. Everyone split up again. As they had to search carefully, they naturally couldn't fly over the treetops anymore. They all jumped to the ground. The tropical rainforest was unbelievably dense. Not only were there rotten muddy swamps, but there were also countless thorns that were as tall as a person. There was no path in the rainforest. If they wanted to move forward, they would have to cut their own path. It had to be said that the number of animals here was terrifying. In just a short 10-li journey, Ning Xuema encountered 6 lizards the size of dinosaurs, 5 lynx the size of tigers, 2 leopards the size of small elephants, and 7 to 8 poisonous beasts that she couldn't name. Of course, these ferocious beasts were not a threat to her at all. They could be dealt with a casual strike. In the end, all the beasts in the rainforest were probably shocked by Ning Xuema's martial arts and began to flee. Ning Xuema saw with her own eyes that a monkey the size of a gorilla flew past her the moment it saw her and ran away like a wisp of smoke. She suddenly had an idea. It would take too much effort for her to search. If she could catch a ferocious beast with spiritual intelligence and interrogate it, she might be able to get something out of it. It had to be said that she had found the right method. When she was an agent, she had met a mutant who understood the language of beasts. That person had taught her a few words of monkey language. It came in handy now. She caught a little monkey and asked it if there were any buildings that were similar to the Earth Temple in the vicinity. Chapter 2266. She was afraid that the little monkey didn't know what an Earth Temple was, so she used monkey language to describe the layout of the Earth Temple. Luckily, the monkey was smart enough to understand. It squeaked, indicating that it knew about this place. Then it stretched out its paw towards Ning Xuema, asking for a reward. It squeaked again, indicating that if she didn't give it a reward, it wouldn't take it. The monkey's head was raised high, looking very proud. Ning Xuema was speechless. This monkey was about to become a spirit. It wanted a reward for leading the way. Monkeys usually liked snacks like bananas, but she didn't even have any food scraps on her, let alone fruits. She searched her pockets but couldn't find anything to give to the monkey. Just as she was considering whether to catch the monkey and force it to give it to her, she looked up and found that the monkey's eyes were staring at her head. One of its paws pointed at her head and squeaked, "I want that." Ning Xuema touched her head and felt a jade hairpin. She subconsciously took it out and shook it in front of the monkey. "You want this?" The monkey nodded its head like a kowtowing bug. Monkeys actually liked hairpins, what a weirdo. Ning Xuema's hairpin was of good quality, but to her, it was something that she could easily get, so she could easily give it away. Since the monkey liked it, then she would give it to it. She wanted to see where it would wear it. The monkey's fur was so short, the monkey happily took it, but it didn't wear it on its head. Instead, it put it under its armpit. Its careful appearance made Ning Xuema want to laugh. The monkey suddenly looked at her scattered hair, blinked its eyes, and squeaked a few times. Ning Xuema understood what he meant. This monkey disliked how her hair was disheveled and suggested that she find another hairpin to wear. A woman would be pleased by her bosom friend, but she couldn't find that bosom friend, so she didn't care about her appearance. She was too lazy to wear any jewelry on her head. At most, she would wear a normal hairpin. She didn't have any other jewelry in her storage pouch, except for the jade hairpin. However, it was indeed inconvenient for her to keep her hair down. Ning Xuema casually pulled a branch from the side and casually cut it into a simple wooden hairpin. She raised her hand and was about to pin it on her head. The monkey on the side probably couldn't stand it anymore. It actually took out a golden hairpin out of nowhere and jumped in front of Ning Xuema, holding it up as if it was presenting a treasure to her. When Ning Xuema saw the golden hairpin, she stared blankly. It was actually a phoenix hairpin. The craftsmanship was extremely exquisite. It was glistening yellow, and the phoenix's eyes were inlaid with emeralds. It looked very lifelike. This golden hairpin was much more valuable than the jade hairpin on her head. It seemed that this monkey had a hobby of collecting hairpins. This golden hairpin should have been obtained from another woman, right? The hairpin was really nice, but Ning Xuema didn't want it. She didn't like wearing jewelry that had been used by others. She waved her hand to reject it. Then, she took the wooden hairpin that hadn't undergone any artistic processing and casually tied her hair into a bun. When the monkey saw that she didn't want it, its eyes revealed disappointment. It still held on to the golden hairpin and stubbornly refused to take it back. It squeaked a few more times, meaning that if she didn't accept it, it wouldn't lead the way for her. Chapter 2267. Ning Xuema absolutely did not expect that she would be able to catch such a perverted monkey. She was anxious to break the array and was too lazy to talk to the monkey. She casually took the hairpin and threw it into her storage bag. "All right, I'll take it. Let's go." In her direction, she could still hear the sounds of her companions being attacked by fierce beasts. However, those people were not weak. No matter how fierce the fierce beasts here were, they could not hurt them. Ning Xuema planned to follow the monkey to find the local temple and call them over. However, the monkey was very stubborn. It insisted that Ning Xuema put on the golden hairpin it gave her and let it see. Otherwise, it would rather die than lead the way. Ning Xuema was helpless against the monkey. She could only unwillingly put her hand into her storage bag. After a while, she took out the golden hairpin and put it on her head. The golden hairpin's tassel dangled beside her cheeks. The monkey looked at her and squeaked a few times. It was actually praising her for being beautiful. Being praised by a monkey, Ning Xuema did not know whether she should cry or laugh. The monkey had achieved its goal. It no longer talked and skipped in front to lead the way. Along the way, they naturally encountered a few fierce beasts that wanted to attack the monkey. The monkey was very clever and slippery. Every time danger came, it would jump behind Ning Xuema to seek protection. After Ning Xuema dealt with the beasts in 2 or 3 moves, it seemed to be frightened. It simply walked side by side with Ning Xuema. One of its little paws even wanted to hold Ning Xuema's hand. Although it was a small monkey, it was still a mutated monkey. It was about 1. 56 meters tall and looked like a child. If Ning Xuema really held its hand, she would not be tired. Ning Xuema only raised her hand and patted its head. She did not hold its paws. The little monkey did not give up and held her hand several times. It finally gave up and walked side by side with her. The monkey led Ning Xuema left and right in the forest. After walking for more than 15 minutes, they arrived in front of a big tree. These trees were unremarkable in this forest. It could be said that they were everywhere. Even the holes in the middle of the trees were ordinary. There was nothing special about them. However, the monkey stopped and raised its head to look at the 2-foot square tree hole. Ning Xuema was full of doubts. She was looking for the Earth Temple. Could it be that the temple was in this tree hole? But this tree hole was too small. How small must the temple be to hide in here? Just as she was about to fly up to take a look, she suddenly heard a roar from far away, and the ground beneath her feet shook again. This feeling was exactly the same as when the array core in the west was broken. Ning Xuema's eyes lit up. Could it be that the formation eye in the south had already been broken? According to her conjecture, this array should have 4 array cores. Now, 3 of them had already been broken, and only the one on her side was left. The monkey's body stiffened from the sudden tremor, and it flew up to the tree. Ning Xuema also flew up to the top of the tree. She shaded her eyes with her hand and looked towards the south. She could faintly see that the clouds there were indeed abnormal. The wind and clouds were changing rapidly. Her lips curled into a smile. The little monkey rushed to her side and squeaked. It tugged at her sleeve, implying that she should go to the tree hole with it. Ning Xuema glanced at it and nodded slightly. Then, she flew down and flew towards the tree hole. The little monkey followed closely behind. Ning Xuema arrived at the tree hole and looked inside. Her heart skipped a beat. Chapter 2268. The tree hole was not too deep. With her eyesight, she could see all the way to the bottom. At the bottom of the tree hole, there was a temple. It was indeed an earth temple, but it was pocket-sized. It looked like a model. Although it was small, it had all the essentials. There were doors, windows, a plaque, a front hall, and a back hall. Ning Xuema had no doubt that there was a pocket-sized Earth Lord inside. However, she reckoned that even a rabbit would not be able to enter such a temple, let alone a person. The monkey pointed at the temple and squeaked proudly, as if it was asking for credit. Ning Xuema patted its head again, indicating for it to be quiet. The monkey widened its eyes and looked at her. The monkey's eyes were yellowish-brown. When it moved slightly, there seemed to be light waves moving around, like a whirlpool in the Yellow River, wanting to swallow people. Ning Xuema did not look at it. She only patrolled at the entrance of the tree hole, as if she was checking something. The monkey was impatient. It urged her to go in and take a look. It even pulled her sleeves. Ning Xuema naturally would not let it pull her. She thought for a moment and instructed it, "This temple is too small. I can carry it with one hand when I go in. Go in and take a look. See if you can enter this small temple." The monkey looked at her for a moment, nodded, and jumped in as expected. The moment it jumped in, Ning Xuema suddenly moved. She raised her hand and set up a wizardry barrier on the tree hole, sealing the tree hole. The monkey was shocked and rushed up again. However, it was blocked by the wizardry barrier. It could not come out at all. It seemed to be very surprised. Its monkey claws grabbed the uneven tree trunk and looked at her with its eyes wide open. It squeaked. It was obviously asking her what she wanted to do. Why did she seal it inside? Ning Xuema looked at it with a gentle gaze, this earth temple is going to be destroyed. However, it is a temple after all. I'm afraid that the Earth Lord inside will blame me. Therefore, I have to give him a sacrifice. You are smart and can be the sacrifice. Remember to put in a good word for me when you see the Earth Lord." As she said that, she used her telekinesis on her palms and pressed them on the tree trunk. A raging flame shot out from her palm and burned towards the tree. Logically speaking, the trees in this tropical rainforest were abnormally humid. The leaves were green and the trunks were full of water, so it was not easy for them to burn. It would be very difficult to set a tree on fire with a torch without pouring gasoline on it. However, the fire emitted from Ning Xuema's palm was the genuine three senses true fire. This kind of fire could even melt iron into molten iron, let alone a tree. This time, Ning Xuema had used the highest level of Samadhi true fire, aiming to burn the tree to ashes. More importantly, she wanted to burn the little monkey in the tree hole to ashes. However, her wishful thinking obviously fell through. As soon as the Samadhi true fire emerged from her palm, the trunk of the big tree flashed. Unexpectedly, from top to bottom, a layer of blue enchantment sprinkled down. The enchantment blocked Ning Xuema's Samadhi true fire, extinguishing the fire in an instant. Heavenly water. This water was the nemesis of the Samadhi true fire. Luo Jiuqin was really cunning. He did things without leaving any loopholes. He actually set this up on the tree. Ning Xuema did not stop at all. As soon as the Samadhi true fire in her palm was extinguished, her sky splitter sword shot out. With a wave of the wind, the sword tip shone brightly. It produced a 3 feet long sword light that cut horizontally towards the tree. When the sword was about to reach the tree trunk, the sword light instantly turned into hundreds of sword lights, each one cutting across a place. This sword contained the essence of all of Ning Xuema's martial arts. Not to mention a tree, even a stone mountain would be cut into pieces by her. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.